Whatever happened to the stores and brands from your childhood? The ones that are gone forever now. You can still see them without half trying. The revolving door, the smell of fresh popcorn and warm cashews, the squeak of your sneakers on a waxed floor, the checkout woman who knew your mother by name. These were not just places to spend money. They were where you learned to count change, where you pressed your face to a glass case full of candy, where a whole Saturday could disappear before you noticed. This is a countdown of 100 of them, the stores and the brands that raised a generation and then quietly slipped away, one shuttered door at a time. Some of them closed fast and loud, with liquidation banners in the windows. Some faded so slowly that you never realized your last visit was the last. We are going to walk back through all of them, from the ones you almost forgot down to the one that will catch in your throat. Number 100, Kmart. Do you remember the crackle of a voice over the loudspeaker, and then the words that made your mother stop the cart cold? Attention Kmart shoppers. A blue light was spinning on a pole over in aisle 7, and whatever sat under it just got cheaper for the next 15 minutes. You could smell the popcorn from the snack bar near the registers the second you walked through the door. Kmart opened its first store in 1962 in Garden City, Michigan, grown out of the old SS Crest dime store company. For 30 years, it was where working families bought back-to-school clothes, motor oil, garden hoses, and Christmas toys in a single trip. The Blue Light Special started in 1965 and became the sound of a bargain, a little bit of theater that turned a Tuesday errand into a treasure hunt. It gave regular people a place where a dollar went far, and nobody made you feel small for counting your change at the register. What it could not do was change fast enough. Walmart undercut it on price, Target got ahead of it on style, and Kmart spent decades slipping quietly behind both. Store after store went dark, until only a small handful were left in the whole country. The blue light stopped spinning, and the loudspeaker went silent. Now the buildings sit empty, or where some other companies sign. So if Kmart was the everyday store, what about the little wall of gadgets and batteries where your father lingered while you begged to go home? Number 99, Radio Shack. There was a little store in every strip mall where the batteries came in a free club pack, and a man in a red shirt could find the exact fuse or adapter you needed. Radio Shack sits at number 99, about the size of a large living room and packed floor to ceiling with wire, plugs, remote control cars, and the warm smell of electronics. It started back in 1921 in Boston, selling gear to ham radio operators and ship captains. By the time you knew it, Radio Shack was where a curious kid bought a crystal radio kit, a soldering iron, or a TRS-80 computer that felt like the future in a beige box. The clerk asked for your name and address before he would ring up a 9-volt battery, and somehow you gave it to him every time. What made the place special was that it fixed things. You could walk in with a broken cord and walk out with the right part and the knowledge to solder it yourself. That was also its undoing. Once everyone carried a phone that did everything, nobody needed a wall of connectors or a man who knew what an ohm was. The company stumbled through bankruptcy, the red signs came down, and the little store that armed a generation of tinkerers went quiet. Do you remember renting a movie on a Friday night? Back when the whole family piled into the car just to go pick one out together. Number 98, Blockbuster Video. Friday night had a smell, and it was the plastic-in carpet air of a Blockbuster, with the new releases lit up along the back wall. Coming in at number 98, that blue and yellow ticket sign glowed over a parking lot full of families deciding on one movie for the whole house. You walked the aisles reading the backs of the boxes, the candy and popcorn stacked by the register, hoping you were fast enough to grab the last copy of the big new release before someone else did. Blockbuster opened in 1985 in Dallas and grew into thousands of stores, the shared weekend ritual of the whole country. You learned the rules early. Be kind, rewind. Have it back by the due date or the late fee would find you. It gave families a shared decision and a shelf full of possibility on a night with nothing else planned. The membership card rode in your wallet, worn soft at the edges, and the clerk swiped it and reminded you what was still checked out and due. The whole town cycling through the same few hundred copies of the big new release. Then a red envelope showed up in the mailbox, then a little red kiosk by the grocery door, then streaming, and the late fee empire fell apart almost overnight. Store after store closed until a single Blockbuster was left standing in Bend, Oregon, kept alive as a kind of museum to a feeling. Have you thought about the store where you bought the television that played all those movies? The one with the salesman in a tie who worked on commission. Number 97, Circuit City. The big box with the red tower out front promised you every television, camera, and stereo under one roof, and a salesman would walk you straight to it. Number 97 is Circuit City. Born in Richmond, Virginia, in 1949 as a store first called Ward's. By the 1980s and 1990s, it was where you bought your first VCR, your first CD player, your first camcorder to film the baby taking her steps. The showroom hummed with 100 televisions all playing the same demo tape, and the sound wall let you stand between speakers taller than your kids. It gave you a place to touch the future before you bought it, and a payment plan to carry it home for Christmas. The salespeople wore shirts and ties and worked the floor on commission, walking you from the televisions to the stereos to the extended warranty, part guide and part closer on every visit. Its trouble came from the inside. The company laid off its most experienced salespeople to save on wages, then watched Best Buy and the internet take the very customers those people used to keep. In 2009, Circuit City liquidated every store in the country, one of the loudest retail deaths of its time. The red towers came down and the showrooms went dark. When you needed a wedding ring, a set of luggage, and a toaster from the same counter, where did your family fill out the little paper slip and wait? Number 96, Service Merchandise. You filled out a little paper slip with a stubby golf pencil, handed it to a clerk, and then watched a conveyor belt carry your jewelry box or your blender out from a warehouse in the back. Service Merchandise, number 96, was the catalog showroom, a strange and wonderful cross between a store and a mail-order book you could actually touch. The showroom floor held one of everything, chained down or locked behind glass, and a thick catalog let you order the rest. It boomed from the 1970s into the 1990s as the place for wedding registries, class rings, and the good luggage that lasted 20 years. It gave you department store goods at discount prices, and the theater of that conveyor belt made a simple purchase feel like a prize you had won. The jewelry counter was the heart of the place, the class rings and the wedding sets locked under glass, and many a couple picked out their first rings while a clerk fetched the box from the back. But the whole model was slow and clumsy. Once the big discount stores put the same jewelry and small appliances out on open shelves, you could just grab yourself. Sales slid all through the 1990s, and in 2002, the company closed every last location. The conveyor belt stopped, and the golf pencils went in the trash. Do you remember when the old 5-and-dime giant opened a huge discount store of its own, twice the size, with a name you already trusted stretched across the front? Number 95, Woolco. Before there was a Walmart on every corner, Woolworths built its own giant discount store and called it Woolco. Number 95, Woolco opened in 1962, the very same year as Kmart, a wide, low building where the old dime store learned to sell in bulk. You could get a bicycle, a bag of tube socks, a goldfish, and a hot dog off the snack counter without ever leaving the building. The red sign carried the trust of the Woolworth name, and for a while, that alone was enough to pull families in from the parking lot. It gave the 5-and-dime company a way into the modern discount age, and for 2 decades, it held its own against the newer chains. The lunch counter near the front served the same grilled cheese and cherry Coke as the old dime stores, a familiar taste tucked right inside the big new discount box. But Woolworths was trying to run both the little dime stores and the big Woolco boxes at once, and it never fully committed to either. In 1983, the company pulled the plug on every American Woolco store at once, thousands of workers out of a job overnight. The Canadian stores were later sold off to Walmart, which is a quiet kind of irony when a discount chain wanted you to feel like you were somebody, which one took its name from an old phrase that meant very good. Number 94, Zayre. The name itself was a promise. Zayre came from an old Yiddish phrase meaning very good, and for a generation across the East Coast and the Midwest, Number 94 was where a family on a budget did its serious shopping. Founded in 1956, Zayre stores were bright and busy, and stacked with clothes, toys, housewares, and the blue light bargains of discount retail. The layaway counter in the back let a mother put a Christmas bicycle on hold in September and pay it off a few dollars at a time until December. It gave working families a way to stretch a paycheck across a whole household without shame. The blue light and bargain energy of the place was unmistakable. A flashing special here, a jammed cart there, the low-price bustle of a store where every dollar got watched closely. Zayre even started a little membership warehouse in the 1980s that would grow into something big. But by then, the stores themselves looked tired next to the new arrivals, and the company decided its future lay elsewhere. In 1988, Zayre sold all of its stores to Ames, and within 2 years that very good name was gone from every storefront, converted or closed. The little warehouse it had spun off, though, was named BJ's, and it outlived its own parent. When a discount store wanted to feel a step above the rest, almost like a real department store, which one dressed up its aisles and called itself the smart place to save. Number 93, Caldor. Some discount stores felt cheap. Caldor tried to feel like a bargain and a treat at the same time, and it earned the nickname the Bloomingdale's of discounting. Number 93, Caldor started in Connecticut in 1951, named for its founders Carl and Dorothy Bennett, and spread across the Northeast with wide, bright aisles and better clothes than its rivals carried. You went there for school shoes and beach towels, for a lamp for the den, for the record album you had been saving your allowance to buy. It gave New England and the New York suburbs a discount store that did not make you feel poor for walking in the door. The store leaned into that reputation with brighter lighting and nicer displays than its rivals carried. In a Caldor bag on your arm held a small, quiet pride on the walk back to the car. The trouble in the end was money. Caldor expanded too fast, took on heavy debt, and got squeezed between Walmart pushing up from the south and Target pushing in from the Midwest. It filed for bankruptcy in the mid-1990s and fought to claw its way back, but the losses kept piling up. In 1999, the last Caldor closed its doors, and a name that had felt like home to millions in the Northeast just stopped existing. What about the discount store with the jingle that swore you had a lot to like? The one your family trusted for the everyday basics. Number 92, Bradley's. You've got a lot to like at Bradley's. If you grew up in New England, you can probably still hear that jingle, and you can picture the store it came from. Number 92 on our list. Bradley's opened in 1958 in Connecticut and became a fixture across the Northeast. A solid, unfussy discount store where you bought sneakers, curtains, and the plastic wading pool for the backyard. The aisles were wide, the prices were fair, and the shopping cart with the one wobbly wheel was part of the whole experience. It gave ordinary families a dependable place to shop, neither fancy nor embarrassing, right in the middle where most people actually lived. The toy aisle at Christmas was a destination all its own. The shelves picked half bare by the middle of December, and more than one bicycle spent November hidden away in a Bradley's layaway room. Bradley's and Caldor were rivals for the same Northeast shopper, and in the end, they shared the very same fate. The company went through bankruptcy in the 1990s, came back for a few years, then finally ran out of road. In 2001, every Bradley's closed, and the jingle went silent for good. When a discount store wanted to reach the small towns the big chains ignored, the ones an hour off the main highway, which one built its stores where nobody else bothered to go. Number 91, Ames. While the big chains fought over the cities and the suburbs, one discount store quietly built itself in the small towns everyone else skipped. Ames Number 91 opened in 1958 in Southbridge, Massachusetts, and made its name serving rural New England, the Rust Belt, and the little communities off the interstate. For a family an hour from the nearest mall, Ames was the store, the place for jeans, tools, motor oil, and the Christmas toys that would not have come any other way. It gave country towns a real discount store of their own, and for a while that focus made it strong. The store carried the practical things a country household ran on: the work boots and the motor oil and the garden seed, right alongside the toys and the school clothes. Ames grew by buying up other dying chains, first Zayre, later Hills, swallowing its rivals to become one of the largest discounters in the whole country. But it swallowed more than it could digest. The debt from all those purchases piled higher and higher, sales sagged, and the company that had grown by absorbing others finally could not absorb its own losses. Ames closed every store in 2002, and the small towns it had served went back to having nowhere nearby to shop. Whatever happened to the store, where the towels and the toys and the tires all sat under a single short word, a store that felt like it belonged to the Hills it was named for. Number 90, Hills. Some families still say the words like a password. Hills is where the toys are. Number 90. Hills department store ran that jingle every Christmas across the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, and it burned itself into a generation of kids who circled everything they wanted in the flyer. Hills started in 1957 and grew into hundreds of stores through Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Indiana. A no-frills discount store with a snack bar famous for its foot-long chili dogs and its cheap frozen ices. You went for the layaway, the sturdy coolers, the bikes hanging from the ceiling, and yes, the toy aisle that ran the whole length of the building. It gave working towns a store that felt like theirs, at prices a factory paycheck could handle. The snack bar up front was a destination all its own. The foot-long chili dog and the frozen issy, a reward a parent handed over after a long walk through the aisles. But Hills leaned too hard on borrowed money and never quite recovered from a leveraged buyout in the 1980s. It limped through bankruptcy, and then in 1999 it was bought out by Ames, its old rival, and the Hills name came down for the last time. The chili dogs and the Christmas jingle went with it. Do you remember the discount store in the Northeast whose name sounded like a friendly neighbor, where you could find everything from a can of paint to a Halloween costume? Number 89, Jamesway. The name sounded like a friendly neighbor, and for shoppers across the rural Northeast, number 89 felt like one. Jamesway opened in 1961 in New Jersey and spread through the country parts of New York, Pennsylvania, and New England. A middle-of-the-road discount store for the towns too small to get a Kmart. You went there for the everyday things, the school supplies in August, the snow boots in November, the wrapping paper and the tinsel in December. It gave small towns a place to buy what they needed without a long drive to the city, and its plainness was part of the appeal. Nobody put on airs at Jamesway. The blue and white sign, the squeak of the cart on the tile, the layaway counter where a mother put a bicycle on hold in October and finished paying it off by Christmas. All of it belonged to a store that met people right where they were. The chain grew steadily for 30 years, but the 1990s were cruel to the mid-sized discounter caught between the giants. Jamesway filed for bankruptcy, reorganized, then filed again, and in 1995 it closed all of its stores for good. The neighbor moved away, and the buildings filled with other tenants or nothing at all. And what of the discount store, a proud old department store company built from scratch, hoping to beat Target at its own game across the Midwest? Number 88, Venture. When the May Department Stores Company looked at the rise of Target, it decided to build its own discount chain to fight back, and it named that chain Venture. Number 88. Venture opened in 1968 and grew strong across the Midwest, especially around St. Louis and Chicago, positioned a notch nicer than the average discounter. You went there for clothes that did not look cheap, for housewares and toys, for the seasonal aisles that swapped from Easter baskets to pool floats to Halloween masks as the year turned. It gave Midwestern families a discount store with a little polish, run by people who had spent a century in the department store trade. The stores were bright and wide, the clothing a cut above what you expected from a discounter, and for a while, a Venture bag carried a little more pride than a plain discount sack. But knowing the old business did not mean mastering the new one. Venture never matched Target's buying power or Walmart's prices, and by the 1990s, it was losing money fast. The company closed the last of its stores in 1998, and many of the buildings were snapped up by, of all rivals, Kmart. when a store out in California wanted you to pay a small fee just to walk through the door, promising deep discounts in return, which one made shopping feel like joining a club. Number 87. Gemco. You needed a membership card just to get inside, and flashing it at the door made you feel like part of something. Gemco, number 87, was a membership department store that ruled Southern California and the West from the 1950s into the 1980s. Inside it was enormous, part department store and part warehouse, with a full grocery, a pharmacy, a snack bar, and aisles of everything from tires to television sets. You went there with your parents on the weekend, the card tucked in a wallet, and you came home with school clothes and a bag of groceries and maybe a new record. It gave Western families a one-stop store years before the big warehouse clubs made that idea famous. The card cost a small yearly fee, and it made ordinary people feel like insiders getting a deal. The snack bar sold cheap hot dogs and popcorn near the exit, and a family often finished the big weekend shop with a treat before loading the car in the California sun. But by the mid-1980s, the membership model was getting squeezed by newer warehouse clubs and by regular discount stores that let anyone walk in for free. In 1986, the parent company shut Gemco down and sold most of the buildings to Target, which was just arriving in California. Do you recall the pair of stores back east run by two brothers, where the prices were so low that people wondered how they got away with it? Number 86. Two Guys. The full name was Two Guys from Harrison, and the Two Guys were a pair of brothers who sold televisions so cheap the competition tried to shut them down. Number 86. Two Guys started in 1946 in Harrison, New Jersey, when Herbert and Sidney Hubschman began undercutting everyone in town on appliances. It grew into a big discount chain across the Northeast and even out to California, selling electronics, groceries, clothes, and hardware all under one roof. You went there because it was cheap, and it was honest about being cheap. No fancy displays, just low prices stacked high. It gave post-war families a way to afford the new television and the new washing machine that suddenly everybody wanted. You could walk out with a color television, a bag of groceries, and a set of tires in the same trip, and the salesman on the floor seemed to know every price by heart. The brothers even fought the old blue laws that kept stores closed on Sundays, and they won, changing the shopping week for good. But the chain expanded into too many businesses and spread itself thin, and by 1981 Two Guys had closed all of its stores. When a discount store carried the biggest name in retailing, selling department store goods under two initials everybody recognized, which one made fine things feel almost free. Number 85. E.J. Corvette. Before most people had ever heard the word discounter, one store was already doing it, and doing it big. E.J. Corvette, number 85, opened in 1948 in New York City and practically invented modern discount retailing, selling name-brand appliances, records, and clothes for far less than the proud department stores dared to. The letters were said to stand for the founder Eugene Furkoff and his partner Joe, and the whole company grew out of a little luggage shop. You went there for the stereo, the LP records stacked deep in bins, the refrigerator, the fine goods the fancy stores sold at twice the price. It gave working New Yorkers access to things that had felt out of reach, and it frightened the old department stores so badly they tried to cut off its suppliers. For a while, Corvette was the future. The record department alone was worth the trip. Bins of LPs sold so cheap that teenagers rode the bus clear across town just to flip through them on a Saturday afternoon. But it grew too fast, pushed into groceries and furniture it did not understand, and lost its focus. By 1980, every Corvette store was gone, the Pioneer outrun by the very industry it had started. How about the variety store out on the plains, 3 letters over the door, where a kid could buy a parakeet, a pack of garden seeds, and a bag of penny candy in one stop? Number 84, TGY, 3 letters hung over the door, and folks joked they stood for turtles, girdles, and yo-yos, though the truth was simpler than that. TG and Y, number 84, took its name from 3 Oklahoma businessmen, Tomlinson, Gosselin, and Young, who joined their variety stores together in 1936. It grew into hundreds of stores across the South, the Southwest, and the Plains. The classic small-town 5 dime stretched into the modern age. You went there for fabric and thread, for goldfish and parakeets, for garden seeds in the spring and glass ornaments in the winter, and always for the candy counter, where a nickel still bought something worth having. The fabric was cut to order off big bolts, the clerk unrolling it across a yardstick fixed to the counter and snipping it clean, a small ceremony repeated 100 times a day. It gave small towns a store that carried a little bit of everything, the place you stopped on the way home from church or school. The wooden floors gave a little underfoot, the register drawer rang when it opened, and the clerk counted your change back into your palm, one coin at a time. But the variety store format was aging, and the big discount chains offered more of everything for less. TG&Y faded through the 1980s, sold off and shrunk piece by piece, until the name disappeared entirely by the early 1990s. Can you still recall the 5 dime, with a founder's name that a young Sam Walton once ran, years before he built something far bigger? Number 83. Ben Franklin. Years before there was a Walmart, a young man named Sam Walton ran a little 5 dime on a franchise called Ben Franklin, and he learned the whole trade behind that counter. Number 83. The Ben Franklin stores were a chain of variety shops stretching back to the 1920s, named for the thrifty founding father, whose face still stares out of the old signs. You went there for sewing notions and craft supplies, for model airplane kits and jars of loose buttons, for the smell of the popcorn machine and the creak of the old wooden floor. It gave Main Street America its everyday store, the one squeezed between the barber and the bank, run by a local family who knew your name. The craft aisles filled with yarn and floss, and half-finished projects waiting to be supplied. And a rainy Saturday could disappear entirely among the model kits and the bins of loose beads. Ben Franklin leaned harder into crafts and hobbies as the years went on, but the little variety store could not survive the age of the giant discounter, least of all against the empire its own former franchisee had built. The chain shrank and splintered, and most of the stores were gone by the 1990s, with just a few crafting shops holding on here and there, when a variety chain grew so large that its collapse became one of the biggest business failures of its day, which one had a founder's initials on the sign and a lunch counter in the back. Number 82. W.T. Grant. For most of the 20th century, a family could count on finding a W.T. Grant store right downtown, and its collapse became one of the biggest business failures America had ever seen. Number 82. The chain was founded in 1906 by William Thomas Grant, who started with a store where nothing cost more than a quarter. It grew into a giant, hundreds of stores with lunch counters, clothing, housewares, and the toys that filled a child's Christmas list. You went there for school clothes and dish towels, for the grilled cheese at the counter, for the record player and the winter coat put on layaway in October. It gave Main Street a dependable general store for 70 years. The lunch counter up front served a hot plate and a slice of pie to shoppers resting their feet, and the toy department at Christmas turned into a wonderland that pulled children through the door. But in the 1970s, the company chased growth by handing out its own store credit cards to customers who could not pay, and the unpaid bills buried it. In 1976, W.T. Grant filed for bankruptcy and closed everything, one of the largest retail failures in the country up to that time. Thousands of workers lost their jobs, and downtown after downtown lost its anchor store. What of the other great 5 dime? The one where the smell of roasting nuts hit you at the door, and a nickel bought a warm paper bag full of cashews. Number 81. G.C. Murphy. The smell hit you the moment you walked in, roasting nuts and fresh popcorn, and it meant you had stepped into a G.C. Murphy store. Number 81. Murphy's was a 5 dime chain founded in 1906 in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, that spread across the mill towns and coal country of the Appalachians and the Mid-Atlantic. Inside were the long wooden counters, the pneumatic tubes that whisked your money to a cashier in a caged booth, the fabric sold by the yard, the pet fish, and the candy weighed out into a little white sack. You went there for everything a household needed and a child wanted, the school supplies, The Sunday hair ribbons, the cap gun, the goldfish that rarely lasted the week. It gave the towns of Steel and Coal a store that matched their pace and their budget. On payday at the mill, the counters filled with families spending carefully, a few yards of fabric here, a bag of hard candy there, the whole store humming with the ordinary business of getting by. But like every five and dime, Murphy's could not stand against the discount giants, and its own company was absorbed and then broken apart. The Murphy name faded through the 1980s and was gone by the 1990s. Do you still remember the dime store where the parakeets sang and the soda fountain mixed a cherry coke, the one whose name you can almost taste? Number 80, McCrory's. The parakeets sang from a wall of cages, and the soda fountain up front mixed a cherry coke while your mother shopped the aisles. McCrory's number 80 was a five and dime chain that began in 1882 in Pennsylvania and spread across the East and South, one of the great dime store names alongside Woolworth and Crescht. Inside you found the wooden floors worn smooth by decades of feet, the glass candy counters, the sewing patterns, the cheap toys and the cheaper thrills, and a lunch counter where a club sandwich and a malt filled a whole afternoon. You went there for the small necessities of a household, the buttons and the shoelaces and the birthday card, and for the little pleasures a child could afford with a quarter. It gave downtown its heartbeat, the store where the whole town crossed paths on a Saturday. In its later years, McCrory's grew by buying up other struggling dime store chains, G.C. Murphy among them, until it was juggling a dozen old names at once. But the whole five and dime world was dying, squeezed out first by the discount stores and then by the malls. McCrory slid into bankruptcy and shrank year by year until the last stores closed in 2002. The singing parakeets and the fountain cokes went silent, and a piece of every main street went dark with them. Remember the granddaddy of them all, the dime store that grew into a giant, the one whose name is stamped on the very idea of the discount store today. Number 79, SS Crescht. You could hold a nickel and a dime in your palm and buy something real, and the store that promised that was SS Crescht. Number 79. Sebastian Crescht opened his first 5 and 10 in 1899 in Detroit, and that red Crescht sign became a fixture on main streets all across the country. The counters held everything a dime could reach: the ribbon and thread, the hardware, the toys, the goldfish, and a lunch counter where a grilled cheese and a Coke cost only pocket change. You went there the way you went to church or the post office, a regular stop in the rhythm of a small town week. It gave working people a place where their money stretched and their kids could dream over the toy aisle. Crescht was so successful that in 1962 it did something bold. It built a big new discount store and named it Kmart, and that store grew so large it eventually swallowed its own parent. The company renamed itself the Kmart Corporation, and the old Crescht dime stores were quietly closed off, the last of them gone by the mid-1980s. The red Crescht sign that had greeted 3 generations came down for good. Do you remember the store with almost nothing on open shelves? Just a showroom of samples, where you circled the toy you wanted in a catalog thick as a brick and picked it up at a counter. Number 78. Best products. There were no shopping carts and almost nothing out on open shelves, just a showroom of samples and a catalog thick as a phone book. Best Products, number 78, was a catalog showroom chain founded in 1957 in Richmond, Virginia, that spread across the country through the 1970s and 1980s. You flipped through the catalog, wrote your item numbers on a slip, handed it to a clerk, and waited while your jewelry, camera, or bicycle rode up from the stockroom on a conveyor. A few of its buildings became famous for their strange fronts: a brick wall that looked like it was crumbling, a corner that peeled away like a page artwork that made the local news. You went there for the good stuff: the class ring, the diamond, the 10-speed bike, the stereo, all at prices below the department stores. It gave families a way to buy nice things for less, with the fun of the catalog and the little thrill of that conveyor belt. But the catalog showroom was a slow way to shop, and once the discount stores put the same goods out on shelves, you could just grab. Its whole reason to exist faded. Best Products went bankrupt and closed for good in 1997. Can you still see the store out of Wisconsin that planted itself in the small cities the giants passed over, with an eye doctor and a pharmacy tucked in the back? Number 77. Shopko. In the small cities of the upper Midwest and the Mountain West, the store you counted on was often Shopko. Number 77. Shopko opened in 1962 in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and grew into a chain that served the towns too small for the coastal giants, but too big for nothing at all. It was more than a discount store. Shopko had a real pharmacy, an optical shop where you got your glasses, and clothing and housewares. That felt a step above the bargain bins. You went there for the prescription and the reading glasses, for the back-to-school clothes, for the toys and the garden supplies, all in a town where the choices were few. It gave the rural West and Midwest a dependable store with services the shrinking downtown could no longer offer. For decades it held on, a survivor while flashier chains died around it. The optical shop in the back fitted glasses for whole families, and in a small town where the eye doctor and the pharmacy had both grown scarce, Shopko quietly carried both under one roof. But a leveraged buyout loaded it with debt it could not carry, and the rise of online shopping finished the job. In 2019, Shopko closed every store and shut down its pharmacies, leaving many small towns without a place to fill a prescription at all. Do you recall the toy store crammed into the corner of the mall, loud and bright and packed so tight the clerk could barely turn around? Every single inch of it toys. Number 76. KB Toys. It was small and loud and crammed into the corner of every mall, and to a child it was pure heaven. KB Toys, number 76, started as KB Toys, named for the Kaufman brothers, who founded the company in Massachusetts back in 1922, when they sold candy before they ever sold a single toy. By the time you knew it, KB was the mall toy store, a tight, bright box stacked to the ceiling with action figures, board games, dolls, and model kits, the clearance bins spilling out into the corridor. You went there on a trip to the mall, pulling your parents by the hand, and you left with a single treasure clutched in a plastic bag. It gave the malls their toy fix, close and convenient, with no trip to a big box needed. The clearance bins by the door were the real hunting ground. Marked-down action figures and puzzle boxes tumbled together, where a patient kid could find a treasure for $1 or $2. The narrow aisles and the tumbled sale bins were part of the magic. But the mall itself was fading, and the big box toy stores and then the internet undercut KB on both price and selection. The company went bankrupt, tried to recover, and finally closed every store in 2009. What about the big toy store where the aisles ran on forever? A true rival to the giant, a warehouse of toys big enough for a child to get happily lost in. Number 75. Child World. Before Toys R Us swallowed the whole country, it had a real rival, a big box toy store called Child World. Number 75. Child World opened in 1962 in Massachusetts and grew into the second largest toy chain in America. Its stores as vast and as crammed with toys as its famous competitors. You pushed a cart down aisles that seemed to run on forever, past the shining rows of bikes, the wall of dolls in their boxes, the board games stacked to the rafters, and the glass case of the good stuff up front. The whole place was a warehouse of everything a child could dream up, and the sheer size of it made your heart race the second you walked in the door. It gave families a real second choice in the toy wars of the 1980s, and for a while the two giants slugged it out aisle for aisle, sale for sale, week after week. The best toys sat locked behind glass up front, and a kid pressed a nose to the case, studying the one thing at the top of the Christmas list, while a parent pushed the cart on toward the practical aisles. But Child World lost the fight. It bled money through the late 1980s, changed hands more than once, and could never quite match the deeper pockets of the rival across the street. In 1992, Child World closed every last store, and the country was left with just the one giant standing. Whatever happened to the toy chain run by the famous company, whose electric trains circled Christmas trees in living rooms all across America? Number 74. Lionel Kitty City. The name behind it was famous for something else entirely: the electric trains that circled Christmas trees in living rooms across the country. Number 74. Lionel Kitty City was the toy store chain run by the Lionel Corporation, the famous maker of model trains and it carried that same wonder into a full-size store. Kiddie City stores were big and bright, packed with bikes and board games, dolls and action figures, and of course, a strong showing of trains and hobby sets. You went there in the weeks before Christmas, your breath still fogging from the cold outside, to hunt down the exact toy at the top of your list. It gave the East Coast, and beyond a major toy chain with a name children already trusted. From the trains under their trees, a train set often ran on a display table near the back, a little locomotive circling its loop, and more than one child stood there transfixed while a parent finished the rest of the shopping. But the toy business was brutal, and Lionel struggled to keep pace with the growing giants. The Kiddie City stores went through bankruptcy and closed for good in 1993, and in time, even the famous train company itself passed into other hands. Do you still remember the toy store built to look like a castle, with towers over the door, where crossing the threshold felt like stepping into a kingdom made for children? Number 73. Children's Palace. Some stores just sold toys. This one built a castle to hold them. Children's Palace, number 73, wrapped its stores in a fairy tale front, complete with towers and turrets and a great arched entrance, so that walking in felt like entering a kingdom made just for kids. The chain grew out of Ohio and spread across the Midwest and beyond, and by the 1980s, it had become part of the Child World empire. Inside the castle walls waited the aisles of every toy imaginable, the bikes and the dolls, the board games and the action figures, all under that storybook roof. You begged your parents to drive to the one with the castle, because the building itself was part of the promise. It gave a shopping trip the shape of a fairy tale, and for a small child that facade was pure magic. You could spot the towers from the parking lot, and the whole car ride there was spent wondering whether the toy you wanted was waiting somewhere inside the castle walls. But the castle could not hold back the same tide that took its parent company. When Child World collapsed in the early 1990s, Children's Palace fell with it, and the turrets went dark or came down. And what of the grandest toy store of them all? The one on Fifth Avenue, with the giant piano you could dance across, where the wealthy and the wide-eyed both came to gawk. Number 72. FAO Schwarz. There was one toy store so grand that a single trip to it became a story you told for years. That giant floor piano waiting just inside the doors. FAO Schwarz, number 72, was the oldest toy store in America, founded in 1862 by Frederick August Otto Schwarz, and its Fifth Avenue flagship in New York was a genuine wonderland. A toy soldier in full uniform greeted you at the entrance. Inside stood the enormous walk-on piano keys, made famous in the movies, life-size stuffed giraffes and elephants, handcrafted dolls, and toys most families could only stand and admire. You went there for a birthday if you were lucky, or you pressed your nose to the window and dreamed. It gave childhood its cathedral, a place where wonder was the whole point. And the price tags came second. The clockwork toys ticked and marched on their shelves. The stuffed animals stood as tall as a grown man, and a uniformed toy soldier held the door as if you were arriving at a palace. But wonder is expensive to keep, and the great flagship struggled as toy shopping moved to the big boxes and then online. The famous Fifth Avenue store closed in 2015, and though the name has flickered back in a smaller form, the Grand Palace a generation remembers is gone. Do you still remember the store, where the walls were lined with records and cassettes, open late into the night, where you flipped through the bins for hours, hunting one perfect album? Number 71. Tower Records. The doors stayed open until midnight, and the yellow and red sign glowed like a promise that the music never had to stop. Tower Records, number 71, began in Sacramento in 1960, grown out of a drugstore that sold records in the back, and became the temple of the record store for a whole generation. Inside were the endless bins, the vinyl, and then the cassettes and the compact discs, the posters plastering the walls, the clerk who knew every band and judged your taste a little. You went there on a Friday night and lost an hour flipping through the racks, the whole world of music at your fingertips, the new release wall standing like a monument to whatever was hot that week. It gave music lovers a home, a place to discover and to belong, loud and late and alive. The clerks behind the counter had strong opinions and were happy to share them, and the handwritten staff picks taped to the bins pointed you toward music you would never have found alone. But the whole business changed the instant music went digital. Downloading and then streaming made the record store obsolete almost overnight, and the mighty chain could not outrun it. Tower Records filed for bankruptcy and closed all of its American stores in 2006. The bins hauled away and the yellow sign gone dark. How about the record store in the mall? Smaller and seemingly everywhere, where a teenager spent every dollar of a first paycheck. Number 70, Sam Goody. Every mall in America seemed to have one, tucked between the shoe store and the food court, and the name over the door was Sam Goody. Number 70, Sam Goody grew from a single music shop opened by a man of that very name in New York into a national chain of mall record stores. Inside were the racks of cassettes and CDs, the wall of new releases, the listening stations where you could sample an album before you bought it, and the posters and band shirts a teenager saved up for. You went there with your allowance or your first paycheck, flipping through the jewel cases, weighing which one album was worth the little money you had. It gave a whole generation their first taste of buying music with their own money. The ritual of choosing, the walk out to the car cradling the bag. You peeled the shrink wrap off in the parking lot, sometimes before you even started the engine, sliding the disc in to hear the first track on the drive home. But the mall record store lived and died on the compact disc, and when music went digital, the entire model crumbled. Sam Goody was folded into other chains, shrank through the early 2000s, and the name finally disappeared from the malls. What of the company that quietly owned so many of those record stores, the giant standing behind half the music counters in America? Number 69, Musicland. You may never have seen the name on a storefront, but it was the giant behind half the music counters in America. Musicland, number 69, was the parent company that ran Sam Goody, Suncoast, and its own Musicland and Media Play stores, a sprawling empire of music, movies, and books in malls all across the country. In its own stores you found the same pleasures, the CD racks sorted by genre, the cassette singles, the movie section growing in the back, the clerk stocking the new release wall on a Tuesday morning. You went there for the album everyone was talking about, the soundtrack from the big movie, the gift for a friend's birthday. It gave the mall its media heartbeat and put a record store within reach of nearly every American teenager. For a suburban kid with a mall and a few dollars in his pocket, a Musicland counter was the front door to the whole world of music, the place where a lifelong love of records so often began. But a giant built on physical music and movies had nowhere to stand once both went digital. Best Buy bought Musicland in the early 2000s, then sold it off as the losses piled up, and one by one, the store names it owned went dark. Remember the record store that took its name from a night of legend, the one that felt like a whole kingdom of music in the middle of the mall. Number 68, Camelot Music. The name promised a kingdom, and for a music-loving kid, a store called Camelot Music felt like exactly that. Number 68, Camelot Music began in Ohio in the 1950s and grew into one of the largest mall record chains in the country. Its stores marked by that round medieval logo and racks packed with every kind of music. Inside were the cassettes and the CDs sorted by genre, the top 40 singles up front, the deeper bins in the back where you finally found the record nobody else carried. You went there to browse, to discover, to spend 20 minutes deciding on the one tape you could afford that week. It gave the mall a serious record store, run by people who loved the music as much as you did. The clerks taped the new release posters to the walls and the front window, and the listening station let you sample an album before you spent your allowance on it. But like every chain built on selling music one disc at a time, Camelot could not survive the arrival of downloading. It was bought up and merged into the larger music companies, and the Camelot name faded from the malls in the early 2000s. Do you remember the store in the mall that sold movies instead of music, where the walls were lined with posters and a life-size cutout of a movie star watched over the register? Number 67, Suncoast Motion Picture Company. It was the store for people who loved movies the way others loved music, and it lived in the mall right alongside them. Suncoast Motion Picture Company, number 67, was a chain devoted to selling films, first on VHS tape and later on DVD, along with posters, t-shirts, and every kind of movie memorabilia. run by the same Musicland empire that owned the record stores. Suncoast filled its walls with cardboard cutouts of movie stars, shelves of box sets, and the hard-to-find imports a serious collector craved. You went there to own the movie you loved. Back when owning a film meant a tape or a disc you could hold and shelve and watch again on a rainy day. It gave film buffs a home in the mall and made building a movie collection a real hobby. The staff could talk for an hour about a director or a hard-to-find import, and the shelves held the special editions and the box sets that a true collector would drive clear across town to find. But when DVDs gave way to streaming, buying a movie stopped making sense, and the store that sold them had nothing left to sell. Suncoast shrank and closed through the 2000s as its parent company collapsed around it. Can you still see the bookstore in the mall, small and warm, where you could lose an afternoon among the paperbacks and nobody ever rushed you out? Number 66. Walden Books. Tucked into nearly every mall in America was a small bookstore where you could lose an afternoon among the paperbacks, and its name was Walden Books. Number 66. Walden Books grew from a book rental library founded back in the 1930s into a chain of more than 1,000 mall bookstores by the 1980s. Inside were the spinning racks of mass-market paperbacks, the bestseller table by the door, the children's corner, the magazines, and the good smell of new paper and glue. You went there for the next book in a series, for the beach read, for the birthday gift, for the quiet of browsing while the rest of the family shopped. It gave millions of Americans their neighborhood bookstore, right there in the mall. No special trip required. Walden Books even had a reader's club with a punch card, a small reward for the faithful. The card got a hole punched with every purchase, and a certain kind of reader kept it in a wallet and filled it slowly, book by book, across a whole year of visits. But the superstores came, the giant bookstores with the coffee bars, and then the internet, and the little mall bookshop could not compete on price or on selection. Walden Books faded through the 2000s and closed for good in 2011. What about the other bookstore in the mall, run by a rival with a founder's name, where the same racks and the same quiet welcomed you in? Number 65. B. Dalton Bookseller. If your mall did not have a Walden Books, it very likely had a B. Dalton, and the two of them split the country between them. Number 65. B. Dalton Bookseller was founded in 1966 by a member of the Dayton family, the same Minnesota merchants who started Target, and it grew into a mall bookstore chain hundreds strong. Inside it looked much like its rival, the paperback racks, the bestseller display, the calendars piled near the register at year's end, the hush that made a mall feel almost civilized. You went there to browse the new hardcovers you could not quite afford, to buy the paperback you could, to find the cookbook or the thriller, or the book for a school report. It gave the mall its literary corner, and helped make buying a book an ordinary errand for millions. The staff hand-lettered little cards recommending their favorites, and tucked them onto the shelves beside the spines. A small human touch in the middle of a shopping mall. But B. Dalton faced the same superstores and the same internet that doomed Walden Books. And in the end, the very same company owned both. The B. Dalton stores were closed down through the 2000s. The last of them shuttered in 2010, when a bookstore grew huge, with towering shelves and a coffee shop and armchairs to sink into, which one turned browsing into an evening out. Number 64. Borders. For a while, a bookstore could be a destination all by itself, a place you went for a whole evening, and the best of them was Borders. Number 64. Borders started in 1971 as a single-used bookshop in Ann Arbor, Michigan, run by two brothers, and grew into a chain of enormous superstores with deep shelves, a music section, a coffee shop, and armchairs that invited you to stay. You went there to browse for hours, to sip a coffee while you flipped through a stack, to sample a new album at a listening station, to let a whole Saturday drift by among the shelves. It gave the book lover a cathedral of print, more titles than any mall store ever held, and the feeling that reading was worth lingering over. The staff were readers themselves, quick to point you toward the next book if you liked a certain one, and the shelves held the odd and the obscure that no mall shop ever had room for. But Borders made a fatal bet. handing its online sales to a rival while it poured money into CDs and DVDs, just as both went digital. It fell behind on the web, drowned in debt, and in 2011 it liquidated every store, more than 500 of them, in one of the saddest retail collapses of its time. Do you recall the bookstore that sold everything at a discount, stacked high and priced low, where a brand new bestseller cost less than it did anywhere else? Number 63. Crown Books. Somebody finally decided out loud that books cost too much and that somebody built Crown Books. Number 63. Crown Books opened in 1977 in the Washington, D.C. area and pioneered the idea of the discount bookstore, selling bestsellers and paperbacks for well below the cover price. Its slogan said it plainly: "Books cost too much, come to Crown Books." Inside, the stores were plain and no frills. The books stacked high on simple shelves, the whole point being price and nothing else. You went there to buy the hardcover everyone wanted for a third off, to grab a stack of paperbacks for a road trip, to feel like you had put one over on the full-price stores. The remainder tables near the front held the real treasures, hardcovers marked down again and again, until a serious reader could carry out an armload for the price of a single new book. It gave readers a real bargain and forced the whole industry to rethink what a book should cost. But Crown was squeezed from both sides, by the big superstores with their vast selection, and by the internet with its even deeper discounts. The chain went bankrupt, and by 2001 every Crown Books was closed. Whatever happened to the video store that fought the blue and yellow giant? The second stop on a Friday night, when the first was already picked clean of new releases. Number 62. Hollywood Video. When the big blue and yellow store was picked clean of new releases, there was a second place to try, and its sign glowed gold. Hollywood Video, number 62, was Blockbuster's great rival, founded in 1988 and growing into thousands of stores that fought for the same Friday night family. Inside, it looked much like its competitor. The new release wall, the candy by the register, the aisles sorted by genre, but with a Hollywood theme. The glamour of the movies painted right onto the walls. You went there when the other store failed you, or because you liked it better, or because it was closer, and you walked the aisles making the same weekend decision. It gave families a choice in the video wars, and kept the late fees a little more honest through simple competition. The membership card rode on your keychain next to the other one, and a family often carried both, choosing on any given Friday whichever store was likely to still have the movie in stock. But Hollywood Video was chained to the same sinking ship as every video store. When Netflix and the red kiosks and then streaming arrived, the whole business had nowhere left to go. Its parent company went bankrupt, and in 2010, every Hollywood Video closed its doors. And what of the video store out in the small towns? The one that reached the places the big chains never bothered with, where a whole county rented its movies. Number 61. Movie Gallery. Out where the big chains never bothered to build. In the small towns and the country crossroads, the video store was often a movie gallery. Number 61. Movie Gallery started in Alabama in 1985 and grew by serving rural America, the towns too small for a Blockbuster, until it became the second largest video rental chain in the country. Inside was the familiar Friday night world, the new releases up front, the older movies deeper in, the candy and the popcorn by the register, but often in a town where it was the only place for miles to rent a film at all. You went there because it was the video store, the one your county had, and the clerk likely knew your family and your taste. It gave rural America the same movie night ritual the cities took for granted. In a lot of little towns, the movie gallery sat in the same strip as the grocery and the hardware store, and renting a film there on a Friday was as much a part of the week as church on Sunday. Movie Gallery even bought Hollywood Video in the 2000s, briefly becoming a giant. But taking on all that debt right as streaming arrived was a fatal mistake. The whole company collapsed, and by 2010, every movie gallery and Hollywood Video was gone, leaving many small towns with no video store at all. Can you still recall the giant electronics warehouse, where the computers filled aisle after aisle, back when a home computer was a brand new adventure? Number 60. CompUSA. when a home computer still felt like a big adventure and a bigger purchase. You went to a warehouse the size of a barn called CompUSA. Number 60. CompUSA was the superstore for computers. Founded in 1984 and booming through the 1990s, as America rushed to get a PC into the den. Inside were aisle after aisle of desktops and monitors humming on display tables, the software boxes shrink-wrapped on the shelves, the printers and the modems and the tangle of cables, and a staff of eager young men ready to explain megabytes to your parents. You went there to buy the family's first computer, to pick up a game or a printer, to marvel at machines that cost as much as a used car. It gave ordinary families a place to touch the future and carry it home, and it made the personal computer feel real and reachable. The software came in big, colorful boxes, lined up like books on the shelves, and a kid could stand at a display machine, playing a game while a parent asked the clerk what a modem even did. But the computer business moved fast and cruel. Prices fell, the machines got simpler, buying online got easier, and a giant store full of expensive humming boxes had no edge left. CompUSA closed most of its stores in 2007 and faded out entirely soon after. Do you still remember the electronics store back east with the loud commercials? The one that swore up and down that nobody could beat it on a price. Number 59. Nobody beats the Whiz. The commercials shouted it so often that you could finish the line yourself. Nobody beats the Whiz. Number 59. The Whiz was a New York area electronics chain. Its full name, Nobody Beats the Whiz. And for shoppers in the city and its suburbs, it was the place for a stereo, a television, or a stack of records. Inside were the walls of speakers, the rows of boom boxes, the television sets stacked in a glowing pyramid, and the salesman ready to haggle you toward a deal. You went there to buy the sound system for the car, the Walkman, the new album, the camcorder, always chasing that promise of the lowest price in town. It gave New Yorkers a loud, brash, hometown electronics store, as much a part of the local scene as the ball club. The salesman worked on commission and knew it, ready to knock a few dollars off if you pushed. So a shopper who liked to haggle walked out feeling like a winner every single time. But loud commercials do not pay the bills forever. The Whiz expanded too fast, lost money, was bought out by a bigger company, and finally closed for good in the early 2000s. The jingle faded from the airwaves, and a piece of New York went quiet with it. How about the electronics chain in the small cities, where the stereo you dreamed of sat waiting under bright lights in a showroom? Number 58. Silo. For the family saving up for a real stereo or a big new television, the showroom to walk was often a Silo. Number 58. Silo was a chain of electronics and appliance stores that spread across much of the country from the 1940s onward, a place built entirely around the big-ticket purchase. Inside were the wall of televisions all tuned to the same channel, the stereo components stacked in glass cases, the refrigerators and washing machines lined up like soldiers, and a salesman on commission, ready to walk you through every dial. You went there to buy the things a household saved for, the color television, the stereo system, the appliance meant to last 20 years. It gave families a showroom to compare, and a payment plan to afford, the electronics store of 100 small cities. The televisions on the display wall all played the same program at once, a whole glowing grid of the same face, and a kid could stand and watch while his parents argued over which brand would last the longest. But Silo got caught in the brutal price wars of the 1980s and 1990s, changed owners more than once, and could not hold its ground against the rising superstores. The chain was shut down in the mid-1990s, its showrooms emptied and its salesmen sent home. What of the steakhouse where the whole family lined up with trays, filled a plate at the endless buffet, and ate until nobody could move? Number 57. Ponderosa Steakhouse. Payday meant a treat, and for a lot of families that treat was a tray, a sirloin, and a trip to the endless buffet at Ponderosa. Number 57. Ponderosa Steakhouse, along with its twin Bonanza, was the affordable family steakhouse that spread across America from the 1960s onward. Its name borrowed from a popular television western. You lined up cafeteria style, ordered your steak at the counter, then carried your tray to the salad bar and the hot buffet, where the rolls, the pudding, and the soft-serve machine waited for you. It was where a working family could all get steak without breaking the bank, the kids piling their plates high, while the parents finally got to sit down. It gave ordinary people the feeling of a night out and a plate they filled themselves. A small luxury on a tight budget. The soft-serve machine at the end of the buffet was the real prize for the children, who swirled their own cones tall and lopsided, and slipped back for a second when no one was looking. But tastes changed. The buffet steakhouse fell out of fashion, and newer casual chains pulled the crowds away. Store after store closed until only a scattered handful were left. The endless buffet all but vanished from the map. Do you remember the burger place with the funny name and the fun little meal for kids? The one that had the idea before the Golden Arches ever did. Number 56. Burger Chef. Years before the Golden Arches handed out a Happy Meal, another burger chain was already putting a toy in a box for the kids. Burger Chef, number 56, was once the second largest burger chain in America, founded in Indianapolis in 1954, and growing to thousands of locations at its peak. You knew it for the flame-broiled burgers, the Works bar where you dressed your own burger with lettuce and pickles and sauce, and the Fun Meal, a kid's box with a burger, fries, a drink, and a toy that came years before its famous rival copied the idea. You went there for a cheap family dinner, the burgers hot off the broiler, the children happy with their little boxes. The Fun Meal box folded open into a little play scene once the food was gone, printed with games and puzzles, and a kid could stretch the meal into an hour of quiet fun right there at the table. It gave working families a fast, friendly meal, and a real rival to the Giant down the street. But the Giant had deeper pockets and a sharper machine, and Burger Chef could never quite keep pace. The chain was sold off in 1982, and its restaurants were slowly turned into Hardee's until the Burger Chef name disappeared entirely by the 1990s. Remember the pancake and coffee house whose name a whole country later had to reckon with? A warm restaurant weighed down by a hurtful word. Number 55. Sambo's. It was once a warm, busy pancake house on 1,000 highways, but its name carried a wound that finally caught up with it. Sambo's, number 55, opened in 1957 in Santa Barbara, California, and grew into a national coffee and pancake chain, the kind of place families stopped at on a road trip for a stack of hotcakes and a bottomless cup of coffee. The founders always said the name came from blending their own names, Sam and Bo, but it echoed a slur and a storybook character that many Americans, and Black Americans most of all, rightly found painful, and some restaurants even hung those hurtful images on the walls. You may remember the good food and the friendly counter, and you may also remember the growing unease about that name. It gave families a cheap, cheerful roadside meal for a time. But by the 1970s, the protests over the name and the images grew loud and just, and the company began to struggle. Sambo's fell into bankruptcy and closed nearly all of its stores in the early 1980s. Most of them sold off and renamed. The single original location in Santa Barbara held on for decades before it, too, finally changed its name for good. Can you still see the burger stand founded by a football star? The one that spread fast up and down the East Coast with a fried chicken counter tucked inside. Number 54. Geno's Hamburgers. The man whose name was on the sign had made his living knocking down quarterbacks, and then he built a burger empire. Geno's Hamburgers, number 54, was founded in 1957 by Geno Marchetti, a star defensive end for the Baltimore Colts, along with a few teammates, and it spread fast up and down the East Coast. You knew it for the Geno Giant, its answer to the Big Double Burger, and for the Kentucky Fried Chicken counter that Geno's ran right inside many of its restaurants, so you could get a burger and a bucket of chicken in one stop. You went there after the game, after church, after school, for a fast, filling meal at a fair price. The Geno Giant came wrapped in paper you peeled back at the table, 2 patties and a soft bun, and for a lot of families, it was the taste of a Friday night after the high school game. It gave the East Coast a hometown burger chain with a football hero's name and a menu that covered every craving. But the burger wars were fierce, And in 1982, Geno's was sold off. Most of its restaurants turned into Roy Rogers, and the football star's name came down from the signs. Do you recall the fast food place shaped like a big red barn, where the roof itself told you that dinner was near? Red Barn, where the roof itself told you that dinner was near. Number 53. Red Barn. You could spot it from blocks away, a building shaped like an actual barn, red roof and all, and it meant burgers were near. Red Barn, number 53, started in Ohio in 1961 and grew into a fast food chain across the country and even overseas, famous for its barn-shaped restaurants and its friendly cartoon characters. You knew it for the Big Barney and the Barnbuster, its takes on the Big Burger, and for being one of the first fast food places to put out a self-serve salad bar. You went there for a quick meal in a building that made the kids grin. The barn shaped a little piece of theater on the roadside. The cartoon characters grinned from the cups and the bags, and a kid finishing a Barnbuster felt like part of the fun. The whole place was built to sell. It gave families a fun, cheap dinner with some whimsy built right into the walls. But Red Barn was owned by a larger corporation that lost interest, stopped renewing the leases, and let the chain quietly wither. By the mid-1980s, nearly all the Red Barns were closed, though a few of those barn-shaped buildings still stand today under other names, unmistakable to anyone who remembers. What about the restaurant that steamed its hot dogs in beer and built a whole meal around them? Number 52. Lum's. The signature dish was a hot dog, but not just any hot dog, one steamed in beer until it was plump and juicy. Lum's, number 52, started in Miami in the 1950s as a little hot dog stand and grew into a national chain built around that beer-steamed Frank, the olive burger, and a menu of hearty casual food. You knew it for the smell of those hot dogs steaming behind the counter, for the mug of beer the grown-ups ordered alongside, for a sit-down comfort that felt a step above a burger stand. You went there for a relaxed meal, real dinner served fast, the kind of place a family could linger over. The beer-steamed hot dog came served in a paper boat, plump and split down the side, and the grown-ups washed it down with a cold mug, while the kids drank their sodas from the same heavy glass. It gave the casual diner a friendly, filling menu, with a gimmick people genuinely loved. But the chain changed hands, expanded past what it could manage, and lost its way through the 1970s. Lum's slid into bankruptcy, and the last of its restaurants closed in the early 1980s, the beer-steamed hot dog vanishing along with them. Can you still recall the steakhouse with the dim lights and the dark wood paneling, where a family dinner felt almost fancy, and the salad bar was the main event? Number 51. Steak and Ale. The dining room was dark and cool, the wood paneling rich, the booths high and private, and for a family dinner it all felt just a little bit fancy. Steak and Ale, number 51, was founded in 1966 by a young restaurateur named Norman Brinker, and it helped invent the casual sit-down chain that so many others would copy. You knew it for the English pub look, the salad bar you built yourself, the warm Hawaiian bread on the table, the affordable steak that made an ordinary Tuesday feel like an occasion. You went there for the anniversary, the birthday, the night your parents wanted something nicer than fast food without spending a fortune. It gave the middle-class family a small taste of the good life. Dinner out with cloth napkins and a candle on the table. The warm Hawaiian bread arrived slightly sweet before you even ordered, and the salad bar let you build your own first course. Small touches that made a modest budget feel like a real night out. Brinker went on to shape much of the casual dining world, but the restaurant that started him could not keep pace with the flood of newer chains it had inspired. Steak and Ale lost customers through the 1990s, and in 2008, its parent company went bankrupt and closed every last one. The dark booths emptied, and the salad bar was carted away. Whatever happened to the Irish tavern chain with the thick menu and the fried appetizers? The one that seemed to anchor every town's restaurant row. Number 50. Bennigan's. Every restaurant row seemed to have one, a green and brass Irish pub with a menu as thick as a book, and a party going on inside. Bennigan's, number 50, was born in 1976, another creation from the same casual dining world that gave us steak and ale, and it grew into a national chain of neighborhood taverns. You knew it for the Monte Cristo sandwich dusted with powdered sugar, the loaded potato skins, the burgers and the fried everything, the clutter of flair on the walls and on the waiters. You went there with friends after work, with the family on a Friday, for the kind of loud, friendly meal that felt like a small celebration. It gave the American suburb its Irish pub, no passport required, a place to gather over a big plate and a cold drink. The Monte Cristo was the thing to order, a ham and cheese sandwich battered, fried, and dusted with powdered sugar, half dinner and half dessert, and unlike anything else on a chain menu. But the casual dining field got crowded. The company took on heavy debt, and in 2008, the corporate-owned Bennigan's restaurants shut their doors overnight, leaving workers stunned and locked out. A handful of franchise locations hung on, but the chain that once anchored every restaurant row was mostly gone. Do you still remember the Mexican restaurant with the festive colors and the endless chips and salsa, the one where the fried ice cream came out sizzling and the whole staff sang for your birthday? Number 49. Kai Kai's. The chips and salsa hit the table before you even sat down. The room was loud and bright with color, and a birthday meant the whole staff clapping their way over to your table. Kai Kai's, number 49, brought a festive version of Mexican food to the American middle of the country. Founded in 1975 in Minneapolis, and named for a nickname of one founder's wife. You knew it for the sizzling fajitas, the fried ice cream, the seafood enchiladas, the frozen margaritas the grown-ups sipped while the kids demolished the chip basket. You went there for a birthday, a celebration, a night when the family wanted something a little festive and fun. It gave Middle America a bright, cheerful introduction to a whole style of food, and for years it thrived. The fried ice cream came out in a warm cinnamon shell with a candle on top, and the whole staff would gather to clap and holler, while a birthday guest turned red and grinned. But the chain struggled with money, and then tragedy struck. In 2003, a hepatitis outbreak was traced to green onions served at a Kai Kai's near Pittsburgh, sickening hundreds and killing several people. And the company, already in bankruptcy, could not survive the blow. Every American Kai Kai's closed in 2004, the festive rooms gone dark. And what of the roast beef sandwich chain that dressed up its dining rooms and piled its salad bar high, chasing a fancier crowd than a roast beef stand had any business chasing? Number 48. Rack's Roast Beef. For a while it looked like roast beef might rule fast food, and one chain bet everything on it. Rack's Roast Beef, number 48, grew out of Ohio in the 1970s and 1980s as a sit-down roast beef chain. Its thin-sliced beef piled on a bun and served with a horsey sauce that had its own devoted fans. You knew it for that roast beef sandwich, but also for the ambitious salad bar Rack's built. An endless spread that in some stores grew into a full buffet with pasta, tacos, and even dessert. You went there for the beef and stayed for the salad bar, a fast food place that tried hard to feel like more. The dining rooms had a warmer, sit-down feel than a burger stand, with plants and soft lighting. Part of that push to seem a cut above the drive-through crowd. It gave the roast beef sandwich a real moment in the sun, and for a time, Rack's had hundreds of locations. But the chain overreached, expanding and dressing itself up faster than it could handle. And odd advertising and shaky management did the rest. Rack's collapsed through the 1990s, most of its stores closing, until only a tiny handful were left scattered across the Midwest. How about the Western-themed chain, named for a cowboy movie star? The one with the famous Fixings bar, where you built your own roast beef sandwich, just the way you liked it. Number 47. Roy Rogers. The name over the door belonged to a real singing cowboy, the king of the Saturday matinee, and the restaurant carried his easy Western spirit. Roy Rogers, number 47, was a fast food chain named for the beloved movie star, launched by the Marriott Company in 1968 and growing strong across the East Coast. You knew it for the roast beef sandwiches, the fried chicken, and above all the Fixins bar, that self-serve counter where you loaded your sandwich or your burger with lettuce, tomato, pickles, and every sauce you wanted. You went there for a meal you built your own way, The Fixin's Bar turning a plain sandwich into your own creation. The roast beef came sliced thin and piled on a soft roll, and you carried it over to the Fixin's Bar to finish it your own way. A small freedom that set the place apart from every drive-thru in town. It gave the East Coast a distinctive fast food option with a cowboy's charm. But the chain changed corporate hands more than once, got converted into other brands, and shrank steadily through the years. From hundreds of restaurants, Roy Rogers dwindled to just a few dozen, mostly in the Mid-Atlantic, a faint echo of the empire it once was. Do you remember the ice cream parlor where a birthday meant a siren, a pounding drum, and a giant sundae carried out to your table on a stretcher? Number 46. Farrell's Ice Cream Parlor. A birthday there was an event, complete with a siren, a pounding drum, and your name shouted across the whole room. Farrell's Ice Cream Parlor, number 46, opened in 1963 in Portland, Oregon, and spread across the country with an old-fashioned theme. The servers in straw hats and striped vests, a player piano tinkling in the corner. You knew it for the enormous sundaes with names to match, the Zoo and the Trough. Mountains of ice cream so big they were paraded out to the table on a stretcher by staff ringing sirens, while the whole restaurant cheered. If you finished the giant zoo all by yourself, you earned a certificate and a place in local legend. You went there for a birthday, a ball team celebration, a reward for a good report card. It gave childhood one of its loudest, sweetest memories, a place built entirely around joy. The candy counter up front sold penny sweets by the sack, and every child left clutching a little white bag in the back seat the whole ride home. But the theme restaurant fell out of fashion. Ownership changed hands more than once, and the parlors closed one by one over the decades, the last few finally shutting down in recent years. What of the restaurant with no waiters at all, where the food waited behind little glass doors and a handful of nickels bought your whole lunch? Number 45. Horn and Hardart Automat. There were no waiters and no menus, just a shining wall of little glass doors, each one with a fresh sandwich or a slice of pie waiting behind it. Horn and Hardart, number 45, ran the great automats of New York and Philadelphia, coin-operated cafeterias that were a wonder of their age from the early 1900s onward. You dropped your nickels into the slot beside the door you wanted, turned the chrome knob, and the little glass door popped open to hand you your macaroni and cheese, your beef pot pie, your slice of lemon meringue. The coffee poured out of the mouth of a brass dolphin. You went there for a good, cheap, honest meal in the middle of a busy city. A hot lunch you served yourself for pocket change. It gave the working city a dignified, affordable place to eat, where a person of any station could get a fresh meal without waiting on a soul. But the automat could not survive the rise of fast food and the changing city, and the wall of little doors slowly emptied. The last Horn and Hardart Automat in New York closed in 1991, and a whole way of eating passed into memory. Do you recall the steakhouse right inside the mall, where you slid your tray along a rail and pointed at your steak through the glass? Number 44. York Steak House. It lived right there in the shopping mall, and you got your steak the way you got your school lunch, sliding a tray along a rail. York Steak House, number 44, was a chain of cafeteria-style steakhouses that flourished in the malls of the 1970s and 1980s, especially across the Midwest and East. You pushed your tray past the glass, pointed at the cut of steak you wanted, watched them cook it, then added your baked potato, your roll, your slice of cake, and paid at the end of the line. You went there for a quick, cheap steak dinner while you were out shopping. No reservation and no waiting for a table. It gave the mall a real sit-down meal and gave families an affordable steak without the fuss of a full-service restaurant. The steak came out under a heat lamp while you slid your tray to the register, and a whole family could eat a hot dinner for the price of a few movie tickets, right there between the shoe store and the fountain. But mall traffic shifted. The food court took over with its faster options, and the cafeteria steakhouse fell out of favor. York Steakhouse faded through the 1980s and 1990s until nearly all of them were gone, with just a single lonely location surviving in Columbus, Ohio, a living memory of the whole chain. Remember the family restaurant that gave you a free slice of chocolate cake on your birthday and knocked a little off your bill for every year of your age? Number 43. Bill Naps. On your birthday, they took a percentage off your bill to match your age. So the older you got, the cheaper dinner became, and everyone left with a little chocolate cake. Bill Naps, number 43, was a Michigan-born chain of family restaurants that spread across the Midwest from the 1940s onward. A wholesome, home-style place beloved by older diners most of all. You knew it for the comfort food, the baked chicken and the pot roast, the cornbread, and above all that individual chocolate cake, given free for a birthday and sold by the box to carry home. You went there after church on Sunday, for the early dinner, for the birthday where the discount and the cake made you feel remembered. It gave the Midwest a gentle, reliable place where the portions were fair, and the staff knew the regulars by name. The dining rooms were done in a soft mint green, the booths roomy and quiet, a calm and gentle place that suited the older folks who made it their Sunday habit. But the home-style family restaurant lost ground to the flashier casual chains, and the loyal crowd only grew older. Bill Naps closed most of its locations in 2002. The recipes sold off, that chocolate cake surviving in a few grocery freezers for a while after. Can you still recall the drugstore with the orange and blue sign, where the pharmacist knew your family, and a soda fountain bubbled away up front? Number 42. Rexall. The sign was orange and blue, and it hung over Main Street drugstores in towns all across America. The word Rexall, a promise of a pharmacist you could trust. Number 42. Rexall was not one store but a huge network of independent drugstores that carried the Rexall name and sold Rexall brand medicines, tied together starting in 1903. You knew it for the pharmacist who knew your family, the soda fountain up front where you got a cherry Coke or a malt, the greeting cards, the cosmetics, the shelves of home remedies. You went there to fill a prescription, to buy a birthday card, to sit at the counter and share a Sunday after school. It gave small-town America a drugstore it could trust, a piece of the community as much as a business. The Rexall calendar hung in 1,000 kitchens, and the store's own brand of aspirin and cough syrup and hand cream sat in medicine cabinets in every town the chain reached. But the big drugstore chains and the discount stores with their own pharmacies slowly squeezed out the independent Rexall stores. The network faded through the 1980s and beyond, the orange and blue sign vanishing from the corners it had held for generations, the name living on only faintly on a few products. Can you still see the drugstore out west famous for its cheap, tall scoops of ice cream, where a nickel or a dime bought a cone, as good as any in town? Number 41. Thrifty Drug. The ice cream came in a strange and perfect shape, a cylinder scooped from the tub with a special scoop, and a single scoop cost a nickel back when you were small. Thrifty Drug, number 41, ruled the drugstore corners of California and the West from the 1920s onward. But generations of Westerners remember it for one thing above all, that cheap, cylindrical ice cream. You knew it for the long counter of ice cream flavors, the cones handed over for pocket change, the aisles of everyday drugstore goods, the film you dropped off to be developed. You went there to fill a prescription while the kids begged for a cone, and somehow the cone is what stuck in the memory. It gave the West an affordable drugstore and an ice cream tradition that became part of childhood itself. The scoop that made those famous cylinders was a special tool that pressed out a perfect round column, and a triple cone stacked 3 colors tall for barely more than a single. But the independent Western chain was pulled into the bigger drugstore world, merged and renamed until the Thrifty name came off the stores. The ice cream, at least, survived the takeover, still scooped in its odd cylinder at the stores that replaced it. A small mercy for anyone who grew up on it. Do you still remember the drugstore back east where the pharmacist filled your prescription, and the aisles held everything from film to fountain pens? Number 40. People's Drug. Up and down the East Coast, the corner drugstore was often a people's drug, its very name a promise that it belonged to the neighborhood. Number 40. People's Drug started in Washington, D.C. in 1905 and grew across the Mid-Atlantic and the South, a familiar fixture with a lunch counter, a pharmacy, and aisles of everything a household needed. You knew it for the soda fountain in the early years, the the pharmacist who filled your medicine and answered your questions, the greeting cards and cosmetics and cameras, the steady, everyday comfort of a store that had always been there. In the early years, the soda fountain up front served a cherry Coke and a scoop of ice cream, and a child perched on a stool there, while a parent waited for the pharmacist to count out the pills. You went there for the prescription, the aspirin, the birthday card. The roll of film dropped off and picked up a week later. The clerk knew your mother by name. The pharmacist remembered which medicine you took without checking the file. And the whole place ran on the quiet trust of a neighborhood that had shopped there for years. It gave the East Coast a trusted neighborhood drugstore for most of a century. But the age of the giant drugstore chains arrived, and People's Drug was bought up and eventually folded into CVS, the People's name disappearing from the storefronts by the 1990s. What about the drugstore of the South, where the name belonged to a founding family and the chain grew to blanket the whole region? Number 39. Eckerd. Across the South and beyond, the drugstore on the corner very often wore a single name, and that name was Eckerd. Number 39. Eckerd grew from a family pharmacy into one of the largest drugstore chains in the country, especially strong across the Southeast. Its blue signs a fixture in strip malls everywhere. You knew it for the pharmacy in the back, the photo counter where you dropped off your film, the aisles of shampoo and cough syrup and school supplies, the 1-hour photo that felt like magic when it came back. You went there for the prescription, the diapers, the greeting card, the summer sunscreen, the everyday errands of a family's life. The 1-hour photo counter felt like a small miracle when it arrived. The pictures from a birthday party ready before you finished the rest of your shopping. No more waiting a week for the envelope of prints. It gave the South a dependable drugstore chain that stretched into thousands of stores at its peak. But the drugstore business consolidated fast, and Eckerd was sold, split, and swallowed. Its stores handed off to CVS and Rite Aid in the mid-2000s. The Eckerd name scrubbed from the signs. Do you remember the drugstore in the Midwest, with all the coupons and the sales, where a family stretched a budget across the pharmacy and the household aisles alike? Number 38. Rivco. In the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, the drugstore that promised discount prices was Rivco, and families counted on it. Number 38. Rivco started in Detroit in the 1950s and grew into one of the biggest drugstore chains in the country. Built on the idea of the discount drugstore, lower prices on medicine and everyday goods. You knew it for the deep aisles of health and beauty products, the pharmacy counter, the weekly sale flyer, the everyday things a household ran through, all at a price a little lower than the rest. You went there to fill the prescription and stock up on the shampoo, the vitamins, the cold medicine, the diapers, watching the sale prices to stretch the paycheck a little further. The blue and red sign glowed on 1,000 corners, and for a Midwestern family watching every dollar, filling a prescription at Rivco instead of the fancy pharmacy across town was just plain common sense. It gave the Midwest an affordable drugstore and helped make the discount drugstore an everyday thing. But Rivco stumbled through a troubled buyout and mounting debt in the 1980s, spent time in bankruptcy, and finally in 1997 was bought by CVS. Its stores converted, and the Rivco name retired. Whatever happened to the drugstore tied to the grocery store, the one where the pharmacy and the supermarket so often shared a single roof? Number 37. Osco Drug. Often it stood right beside the grocery store, sometimes under the very same roof, the drugstore half of a one-stop shopping trip. Osco Drug, number 37, was a Midwestern drugstore chain that grew large through the 20th century, frequently paired with a supermarket, so a family could buy the week's food and fill the month's prescriptions in a single stop. You knew it for the pharmacy counter, the aisles of health and beauty goods, the photo center, the seasonal aisle that turned from Valentine's to sunscreen to Halloween candy as the year rolled on. You went there with the grocery list in hand, adding the prescription, the toothpaste, the birthday card to the cart. Because the drugstore so often shared a wall with the supermarket, a parent could drop the film, fill the prescription, and grab the milk in a single stop, the two stores working together as one long errand. It gave the Midwest a convenient drugstore, woven right into the weekly grocery run. But the great consolidation of the drugstore business swept up Costco too. Many of its standalone stores were sold to CVS and rebranded, and the Costco name largely faded, surviving mostly where it stayed joined to a grocery store. Do you recall the supermarket back east, where the whole family's groceries came home in brown paper bags, the one carrying a name from the days of penny candy and full-service counters? Number 36. Food Fair. Before the giant supermarkets took over, the place a family filled its cart each week was often a food fair. Number 36. Food Fair was a large grocery chain that spread across the East Coast and into the South from the 1930s onward, later also known by the name Pantry Pride. You knew it for the long aisles of canned goods in cereal boxes, the butcher counter in the back, the produce misted and stacked in pyramids, the cashier ringing up your order on a clacking register, while a bag boy packed the brown paper sacks. You went there every week, the whole family sometimes, pushing the cart down the aisles and adding the specials from the flyer. It gave East Coast families a full-service supermarket at a time when that was still a marvel. Everything under one roof. The green stamps came with your total, and a thrifty shopper pasted them into books all year, toward a new mixer, or a set of dishes from the Redemption catalog. But the grocery business grew fiercely competitive, and Food Fair struggled with debt and management troubles, sliding into bankruptcy in the late 1970s. The stores were sold off or closed, and the Food Fair and Pantry Pride names faded from the East Coast. And what of the grocery chain with the Union in its name? The one whose stores stretched from New England down through the Mid-Atlantic. Number 35. Grand Union. The name had a proud, old-fashioned ring to it, and Grand Union stores anchored the grocery shopping of the Northeast for well over a century. Number 35. Grand Union began back in the 1870s and grew into one of the great supermarket chains of the East. Its stores a weekly stop from New England down through New York and the Mid-Atlantic. You knew it for the wide, bright aisles, the trading stamps you saved and pasted into books to redeem for a toaster or a lamp, the deli counter, the bakery smell near the entrance, the specials stacked at the end of every aisle. You went there every week with the list and the coupons, the cart filling with the family's food, the kids angling for a treat at the checkout. It gave the Northeast a grocery institution, a name your grandmother trusted and your mother trusted after her. The green trading stamps came by the yard at the register, and a patient family filled book after book across a year of shopping, redeeming them for a blender or a lamp from the catalog. But the modern era of the giant discount grocers and the warehouse clubs squeezed the old chain hard. Grand Union went through bankruptcy more than once, shrank store by store, and finally closed the last of its supermarkets in the 2010s. Can you still recall the supermarket in New York and New Jersey, where the deli lines ran long, and the store stayed open when others had already closed? Number 34. Pathmark. In the crowded neighborhoods of New York and New Jersey, the supermarket that stayed open late and priced things low was Pathmark. Number 34. Pathmark grew out of a grocery cooperative and became a powerhouse across the metropolitan Northeast from the 1960s onward. Known for big stores, long hours, and aggressive sale prices, some of the stores stayed open around the clock, a rare thing then. So a night shift worker or a new parent could push a cart down a bright, near-empty aisle at 3 in the morning. You knew it for the enormous stores that carried everything, the long deli lines on a Sunday, the generic products in plain packages that saved a family real money, the pharmacy and the sales circular that ran your week. You went there because it was open when you needed it, and it was cheap. The workhorse supermarket of a busy region. The generic line in the plain black and white packages was its own kind of famous. The no-name paper towels and the plain label soda that let a big family eat for less, without anyone going without. It gave working families in a high-cost part of the country a way to feed a household without falling behind. But the grocery wars intensified. Competitors moved in, and Pathmark's parent company took on crushing debt. The chain went bankrupt, was absorbed by its old rival A&P, and then closed for good in 2015, when that company itself collapsed. How about the supermarket out west, whose very name told you that you were fortunate to be shopping there. Number 33. Lucky Stores. The name was a small daily promise, and for shoppers across California and the West, being in a Lucky Store felt like getting a deal. Number 33. Lucky Stores was a major supermarket chain that grew strong through the West from the 1930s onward. Built on the idea of low prices for the everyday shopper. You knew it for the slogan that promised low prices every day. The wide aisles, the produce section, the bakery, and the deli. The checkout where the total came in a little lower than you feared. You went there every week for the family's groceries, trusting that the prices would be fair without having to clip a coupon for every last item. It gave Western families an honest, affordable place to shop, a name woven into the routine of a Saturday morning. The clerk stamped the price right onto the cans and boxes in those days, and a careful shopper watched the register to make sure the total matched the shelf. But in 1999, the chain was bought by Albertsons, and the Lucky name was pulled off the stores and replaced, erasing a brand generations had trusted. Some of the name flickered back later under different ownership, but the Lucky Stores that a generation grew up with were gone. Do you still remember the supermarket out west whose name marched right through the alphabet? From A to B, a grocery store built on a genuinely clever idea. Number 32. Alpha Beta. The name came from a genuinely clever idea, arranging the groceries in alphabetical order so a shopper could find anything fast. Alpha Beta, number 32, was a Southern California supermarket chain that took its name from that early experiment in alphabetizing the aisles, and it grew into a major grocery presence across the West. The chain leaned into that clever name for years, and the jingle built around it stuck in the head of every child who ever rode along in the cart. You knew it for the big bright stores, the produce and the meat counter, the house brand goods, the trading stamps, the checkout lanes humming on a busy weekend. You went there for the weekly shopping, the cart winding through aisles that had once been sorted like a dictionary, filling up with the family's food. The trading stamps came by the sheet at the register, and you licked them and pressed them into little books, saving up toward a toaster or a lamp from the redemption catalog, a small reward for a season of grocery runs. It gave Western families a reliable supermarket with a memorable name and a friendly reputation. But the grocery business kept consolidating, and Alpha Beta was bought, merged, and eventually absorbed into other chains through the 1990s, its name disappearing from the storefronts. What of the grocery chain whose old-fashioned name still carried a hint of the tea trade it grew out of? Once one of the largest in the entire country. Number 31. National Tea. The name reached back to the days when a grocery store still weighed out your tea and coffee by hand, and National Tea grew from that world into a supermarket giant. Number 31. National Tea began in Chicago in 1899 as a small tea and grocery shop, and grew into one of the largest grocery chains in the whole country by the middle of the 20th century. You knew it for the everyday supermarket routine, the canned goods and the cereal, the meat counter and the produce, the trading stamps, the cashier and the bag boy, a national store anchoring neighborhoods across the Midwest and the South. You went there each week to feed the family, the national sign as ordinary and dependable as the church down the street. The name was a holdover from the founding days, when clerks scooped loose tea and ground coffee to order, a small piece of an older world hanging over a modern supermarket. It gave a huge swath of the country a grocery store could count on for generations. But the chain lost ground to newer, sharper competitors through the 1970s, shrinking region by region as it sold off or closed its stores. By the 1990s, the National Tea name had all but vanished from American streets. Do you remember the grocery store of the upper Midwest, where a friendly owl watched over the checkout, its wide eyes part of every shopping trip? Number 30. Red Owl. A wide-eyed owl watched over the whole thing, painted on the sign and printed on the bags. And for the upper Midwest, that owl meant groceries. Red Owl number 30 was a supermarket chain that served Minnesota, the Dakotas, Wisconsin, and the surrounding states from 1922 onward. Its cheerful owl mascot, beloved by a whole generation of kids. You knew it for that owl, for the aisles of everyday food, The meat counter, the trading stamps, the shelves of house-brand goods, the small-town grocery that felt like it belonged to your community. You went there every week for the family's food, and the kids looked for the owl the way they looked for a friend. It gave the upper Midwest a hometown grocery store with a face and a personality, not just a place, but a familiar friend. The red owl stamps came with your total, and a family pasted them into books all season, saving toward a set of glasses or a new roasting pan from the redemption store. But the bigger chains moved in with lower prices and larger stores, and Red Owl could not keep up. The chain was sold and shrank through the 1980s, and the friendly owl slowly disappeared from the corners it had watched over for 60 years. Remember the grocery store of Chicago, the one whose name felt like a neighbor's, and whose stores were woven right into the life of the city. Number 29. Dominick's. In Chicago, the grocery store you grew up with was very often a Dominick's, its name as much a part of the city as deep dish pizza. Number 29. Dominick's was founded in Chicago in 1918 by a man named Dominick Di Matteo, and it grew from a single neighborhood grocery into a supermarket chain that fed the whole city for generations. You knew it for the fresh produce, the deli and the bakery, the meat counter where the butcher knew your order, the aisles you could navigate blindfolded, the store where you ran into half the neighborhood on a Saturday morning. You went there every week for the family's food, a Chicago institution woven into the rhythm of the city. The bakery smell reached you near the front doors, the bins of Italian bread and the sheet cakes decorated behind glass, part of why a quick trip so often turned into a long one. It gave Chicagoans a hometown grocery store they trusted through good times and hard ones. But Dominick's was bought by the national chain Safeway, which never quite understood the local loyalty it had purchased, and the stores slowly lost their soul. In 2013, Safeway closed every Dominick's, and Chicago lost a grocery name it had loved for nearly a century. Do you recall the car in the driveway with the strange, proud name, the one your father or grandfather drove long after the company that made it was gone? Number 28. Studebaker. Years before it built cars, the company had built wagons for the pioneers heading west, and that heritage rode in every Studebaker. Number 28. Studebaker began in Indiana in 1852 as a maker of wagons and carriages, then became one of America's proud independent automakers, building cars with a style all their own. You knew it for the bold, forward-looking designs, the bullet-nosed models of the early 1950s, the sleek Avanti and the sporty Hawk, cars that dared to look different from the offerings of the big three. Your father or your grandfather may have driven one and defended it and remembered it fondly for decades after. The bullet nose on the front of a 1950 Studebaker looked like nothing else on the road, and people either loved it or laughed at it, but nobody ever mistook it for another car. It gave American drivers an independent alternative with genuine character and engineering pride. The Avanti was so sleek that a version of it set speed records out on the Salt Flats, proof that a small company could still build something the giants of Detroit would not dare to try. But an independent automaker could not survive against the giants of Detroit forever. Studebaker lost money through the 1950s, merged and struggled, and finally built its last car in 1966, closing the doors on a company that had carried Americans across the continent for over a century. Can you still see the scrappy car company that gave us the funny little economy cars? The underdog of Detroit with a lineup all its own. Number 27. American Motors. It was the scrappy underdog of Detroit, the little company that made the cars nobody else dared to build, and its name was American Motors. Number 27. American Motors, known as AMC, was formed in 1954 and spent decades as the plucky fourth automaker, fighting the big three with smaller budgets and bolder ideas. You knew it for the odd and lovable cars, the stubby Gremlin, the bubble-shaped Pacer with its enormous windows, the sporty Javelin and AMX, and later the Eagle, one of the first vehicles to combine a car with four-wheel drive. AMC also owned Jeep, which turned out to be its most lasting gift to the road. You went with AMC if you wanted something different, something affordable, something with a bit of personality the Giants lacked. It gave American drivers a real alternative and some of the most memorable oddball cars ever built. The Pacers' wraparound glass made it look like a fishbowl on wheels, and the Gremlins' chopped-off tail turned heads on every block. Cars that were easy to tease and impossible to forget. But the underdog could only fight so long. AMC was bought by Chrysler in 1987, and the American Motors name disappeared, though Jeep rolled on to outlive them all. Do you recall when the affordable cars in the driveway came from Japan, under a name that later vanished, changed overnight to something else entirely? Number 26. Datsun. For a whole generation, the reliable, affordable little import in the driveway wore a name that would one day disappear without warning, and that name was Datsun. Number 26. Datsun was the brand under which Nissan of Japan first won over American drivers. From the 1950s through the 1980s, building a reputation for cars that were cheap to buy, easy on gas, and hard to kill. You knew it for the dependable little sedans and pickup trucks, and above all for the 240Z, a sleek and affordable sports car that stunned everyone and made Datsun a name to respect. You went with a Datsun when you wanted a car that would start every morning and sip fuel through a gas crisis, and it rewarded your trust for years. It gave American families an affordable, reliable alternative, just as they were learning to love the imports. The little Datsun pickup became a favorite of workers and small farmers who wanted something cheap and nearly unkillable, and plenty of them were still hauling loads long after the name on the tailgate had officially disappeared. But in the early 1980s, the parent company decided to retire the beloved Datsun name and rebrand everything as Nissan, a costly and confusing change that puzzled loyal owners. By 1986, the Datsun name was gone from the new cars, surviving only on the older models, still faithfully running in driveways across the country. What about the car brand from the heart of Detroit, one of the oldest names on the road, that a giant finally shut down for good? Number 25. Plymouth. It was one of the great names of the American road, a brand that put a brand new car within reach of the ordinary family, and its name was Plymouth. Number 25. Plymouth was launched by Chrysler in 1928 as its affordable line, and for most of the 20th century, it was the car a working family could actually afford, dependable and unpretentious. You knew it for the solid, honest sedans, the muscle cars of the 1960s like the Road Runner and the Barracuda, that roared far above their price, the Valiant and the Duster that just kept running. You went with a Plymouth when you needed real value, a real car for real money, no frills and no apologies. It gave millions of American families their first new car, their reliable daily driver, their taste of the open road. The Road Runner even came with a horn that beeped like the cartoon bird, a wink of fun bolted onto a car a young man could just barely afford, and it flew out of the showroom. But by the end of the century, Chrysler had too many overlapping brands, and Plymouth was the one it chose to cut. The last Plymouth rolled off the line in 2001, and one of the oldest names in American driving was retired for good. Can you still recall the brand that built the excitement? The one whose arrowhead badge meant muscle and speed to a whole generation of young drivers. Number 24. Pontiac. The slogan promised excitement, and for young drivers the arrowhead badge on the grille delivered it. Pontiac, number 24, was General Motors' performance brand. Born in 1926, and rising to become the division that built the muscle cars boys dreamed about. You knew it for the GTO, often called the first true muscle car, for the Firebird and the Trans Am with the screaming eagle painted across the hood, for the Bonneville and the Grand Prix, cars that meant speed and swagger. You went with a Pontiac when you wanted your car to have an attitude, to turn heads at the drive-in and leave the stoplight first. The Trans Am with the golden bird spread across its hood became a movie star in its own right, and a teenager who could never afford one still knew every curve of it by heart. It gave American drivers, especially the young ones, a brand that stood for power and style and a little rebellion. But by the 2000s, General Motors was drowning in too many brands, and when the company nearly collapsed and was reorganized in 2009, Pontiac was one of the names it dropped. The last Pontiacs were built in 2010, the Arrowhead retired, and the excitement quietly switched off. Whatever happened to the brand that built a solid, respectable car for the family? One of the oldest automakers in the world, shut down by that very same crisis. Number 23. Oldsmobile. It was one of the oldest automobile names in the entire world. A brand your grandfather trusted and your father drove, and its name was Oldsmobile. Number 23. Oldsmobile began in 1897. Among the very first companies to build cars in America, and for over a century it stood for the solid, comfortable, respectable family car. You knew it for the smooth-riding Cutlass, one of the best-selling cars in the country for years, for the Big 98 and the Delta 88, for the Rocket V8 engine that gave the brand its power. You went with an Oldsmobile when you wanted a car that felt a step up, dignified and dependable, the choice of a family that had arrived. It gave American drivers over 100 years of steady, trustworthy cars. The Cutlass Supreme sat in more American driveways than almost any other car of its day. A quiet, comfortable coupe that carried families to church and children off to college for a whole decade. But by the 1990s, the brand felt old-fashioned, and even a famous ad campaign insisting this was not your father's Oldsmobile could not win back the younger buyers. In 2004, General Motors built the last Oldsmobile, ending one of the oldest car names in the world after 107 years. Do you still remember the television set in the living room? The heavy wooden console with the name that promised the quality went in before the name went on. Number 22. Zenith. The heavy wooden console anchored the whole living room, and the name on it made a proud promise. The quality goes in before the name goes on. Zenith, number 22, was one of America's great television and radio makers, a Chicago company that built its reputation on that motto, and on sets that lasted for decades. You knew it for the big console televisions in their wooden cabinets, the Space Command remote control that clicked when you changed the channel, the radios and the record players, all built to a standard families trusted. You went with a Zenith when you wanted an American-made set that would sit in your living room for 20 years, the centerpiece of family evenings, the screen the whole house gathered around. The Space Command remote was a marvel in its day, changing the channel with a click and no wire at all, and a kid felt a little jolt of power every time it worked. It gave American homes a television they could count on, a brand that stood for quality made right here. But the flood of cheaper, imported electronics slowly overwhelmed the American television makers, and Zenith fought a long, losing battle. The company was bought by a Korean electronics giant in the 1990s, and the proud American name became just a label on foreign-made sets before fading almost entirely. And what of the camera that spat out a photograph on the spot, the little square picture you held and watched slowly appear before your eyes? Number 21. Polaroid. You pressed the button, the camera whirred and spat out a square of film, and then you waited, watching the ghostly image slowly bloom into a real photograph right in your hand. Polaroid, number 21, gave the world instant photography, and for decades no birthday party or family gathering was complete without that whir and that little developing square. You knew it for the boxy cameras, the film that developed before your eyes, the picture you could hold and pass around the room while the memory was still warm. People even shook the photos to hurry them along, though it turned out the shaking never really helped. You reached for a Polaroid when you could not wait for the drugstore to develop your film, when you wanted the moment now, in your hand. It gave families instant magic, a photograph on the spot at a wedding, a reunion, a Christmas morning. But when digital cameras arrived, and then phones with cameras built in, the whole world could suddenly take a picture and see it instantly, and Polaroid's magic became ordinary. The company that invented instant photography went bankrupt, and it stopped making its famous instant film in 2008, ending an era of little squares slowly coming to life in eager hands. Do you remember the Diet Cola in the pink can? The one your mother sipped, with a taste all its own that nothing else ever quite matched. Number 20. Tab. The can was pink, the taste was unmistakable, and for a whole generation of dieters, it was the only soda that counted. Tab, number 20, was Coca-Cola's Diet Cola, introduced in 1963. And for years before Diet Coke ever existed, Tab was the drink for anyone watching their weight. You knew it for that distinctive pink can, for the sharp, slightly bitter taste its loyal fans swore by and everyone else found strange, for the sight of it in your mother's hand, or waiting in the refrigerator door. You reached for a Tab when you wanted the bubbles and the caffeine without the sugar, a small daily ritual for millions. The pink can sat in the door of the refrigerator like a fixture, and a certain generation of mothers rarely went a day without one. The taste tied forever to a particular kitchen and a particular time. It gave dieters a soda to call their own decades before the shelves were full of them. But when Coca-Cola launched Diet Coke in 1982, it slowly stole Tab's crowd, and the older drink faded into a small but fiercely loyal following. Coca-Cola kept making it for its die-hard fans for years, but in 2020 the company finally discontinued Tab for good, and the pink can vanished from the cooler where it had lived for nearly 60 years. How about the clear cola that arrived with a huge splash and then disappeared almost as fast? A soda you could see straight through. Number 19. Crystal Pepsi. It looked like nothing you had ever seen in a cola, clear as water but tasting like Pepsi. And for a brief, strange moment it was everywhere. Crystal Pepsi, number 19, arrived in the early 1990s with an enormous advertising push, riding a national craze for anything clear and pure. And it promised a cola you could see straight through. You knew it for the see-through bottle, the sheer novelty of a clear cola, the commercials that made it feel like the drink of the future. You reached for a Crystal Pepsi out of pure curiosity, to taste the strange clear soda everyone was talking about. It gave the early 1990s one of its biggest and most memorable product launches. The campaign wrote a famous rock song and ran during the biggest broadcasts of the year, so loud and so everywhere that the sudden collapse afterward felt almost impossible. But the novelty wore off fast. People were confused by a clear drink that tasted like a dark one. The flavor never quite satisfied, and the craze collapsed as quickly as it had risen. Crystal Pepsi was pulled from the shelves by 1994, gone almost as soon as it had come, remembered now mostly as a symbol of a moment when clear was king. Do you recall the chocolate sandwich cookie that came before the famous one? The original that most people never even knew was first. Number 18. Hydrox. Everyone thinks of the famous cookie as the original, but the truth is another chocolate sandwich cookie came first, and its name was Hydrox. Number 18. Hydrox was introduced in 1908, a full 4 years before its far more famous rival. 2 chocolate wafers with a white cream filling, the cookie that actually invented the whole format. You knew it if you knew it at all, as the slightly less sweet, slightly crispier sandwich cookie, the one your family bought when the famous brand was not on sale, the underdog with the strange chemical-sounding name. You reached for a Hydrox and found a cookie many fans insisted was the better of the two, one that held up in milk without turning to mush. It gave America its first chocolate sandwich cookie, and a devoted following that lasted for decades. Fans swore the Hydrox held up better in a glass of milk, staying crisp while the famous rival went soft. A small point of pride for the people who reached past the bigger box. But being first was not enough. The famous rival outsold and out-advertised Hydrox for a century, and its odd name made people wrongly assume it was the imitation. Hydrox was discontinued in 1999, and though it has flickered back to life a few times since, the original that started it all is mostly a memory now. What of the striped pack of gum with the zebra on it? The one whose flavor burst bright and then vanished in about a minute. Number 17. Fruit Stripe Gum. The wrapper was covered in bright stripes. A cartoon zebra grinned from the pack, and the flavor exploded the second you started chewing, and then vanished almost as fast. Fruit Stripe Gum, number 17, was the wildly colorful fruit gum that generations of kids loved for its rainbow stripes, its zebra mascot named Yipes, and the temporary tattoos printed right on the wrappers. You knew it for the burst of sweet fruit flavor that lasted about a minute before fading to nothing, for the zebra stickers you pressed onto your arm, for the pure childish fun of a pack that was more toy than candy. You reached for Fruit Stripe knowing the flavor would not last, because chewing it was the whole point. The color and the cartoon and the tattoo, all part of the deal. It gave kids a small, cheap, joyful ritual for decades. You could chew a whole pack at once and mash the colors together, and the zebra tattoo pressed onto your arm from a licked wrapper was worth as much to a kid as the gum itself. But a gum famous for flavor that disappeared in a minute was always going to struggle, and sales slowly dwindled. In 2024, the company finally discontinued Fruit Stripe, retiring the grinning zebra and the striped pack after more than 50 years. Can you still recall the store where the price tag came down a little more every week, where a patient shopper could wait out a bargain until it was nearly free? Number 16. Filene's Basement. There was a store where the longer a coat hung on the rack, the cheaper it got all on its own, and it turned bargain hunting into a genuine sport. Filene's Basement, number 16, was the famous discount basement beneath the great Filene's department store in Boston, and it ran on a brilliant idea: the automatic markdown. Every item was marked with the date it arrived, and as the weeks passed, the price dropped by itself, 25%, then 50%, then 75%, until at last it was given to charity if no one bought it. You knew it for the chaos and the thrill, the crowded aisles, the shoppers trying on coats right there in the open, the famous running of the brides when the wedding dresses went on sale, and women raced good-naturedly for a gown. You went there to gamble, to spot a designer suit and decide whether to grab it now or risk waiting for a lower price. It gave bargain hunters a real game and a shot at fine goods for pennies on the dollar. But the famous basement was eventually cut loose from its parent store, expanded too fast, and lost the old magic. Filene's Basement went bankrupt and closed for good in 2011. The automatic markdown clock stopped at last. Do you still remember the Grand department store in Boston? The one whose bakery filled the whole floor with the smell of warm blueberry muffins. Number 15. Jordan Marsh. The smell reached you before you ever saw the counter. Warm blueberry muffins baking somewhere in the great Boston store, and it drew shoppers like a magnet. Jordan Marsh, number 15, was the Grand department store of Boston and New England. Founded back in 1841, a downtown palace of retail where generations shopped for everything from a wedding dress to a Christmas toy. You knew it for those famous blueberry muffins, sold warm from the bakery and beloved for over a century, for the enormous Christmas displays, for the enchanted village of animated figures that families lined up around the block to see every December. The muffins came out of the oven warm all day, sugar crackling on top, and people bought them by the box just to carry that smell home with them. You went there for the big occasions, the Easter dress, the winter coat, the holiday shopping, and you went for the muffins too. It gave New England a department store that was part of the region's very identity, a place woven into every childhood Christmas. But the great downtown department stores were fading everywhere, and Jordan Marsh was absorbed into Macy's in 1996. Its beloved name pulled off the building. The muffins live on in copied recipes, but the store that made them is gone. Remember the Grand department store of California, the elegant one where the movie stars shopped and the perfume floated through the air. Number 14. Bullock's. Out in Los Angeles, there was a department store so elegant that the movie stars shopped there, and its name was Bullock's. Number 14. Bullock's opened in 1907 and became the Grand department store of Southern California. Its flagship on Wilshire Boulevard, a stunning building where luxury and glamour met. You knew it for the fine fashions, the perfume counter that scented the whole ground floor, the tea room where ladies lunched, the elegant service that made a shopping trip feel like an event. You went there for the special occasion, the good dress, the wedding gift, the taste of California glamour that Bullock's sold as much as any product on its shelves. The Wilshire building had a grand entrance off the parking lot in the back, built for customers who arrived by automobile, a small sign of how well Bullock's understood the California way of life. It gave the West Coast a department store worthy of Hollywood, a place of genuine beauty and style. But the age of the Grand department store was ending, and even elegance could not stop it. Bullock's was folded into Macy's in 1996, the same year so many great names fell, and the glamorous store that dressed the stars was gone. Do you remember the department store of Southern California that felt like the whole community's front porch? The one your family called just the store downtown. Number 13. The Broadway. For everyday families across Southern California, the department store was not the glamorous one but the friendly one, and it was called the Broadway. Number 13. The Broadway opened in downtown Los Angeles in 1896 and grew into the department store of the Southern California middle class. Big, bright, and welcoming, the anchor of shopping malls all across the region. You knew it for the wide floors of clothing and housewares, the appliance department, the toy floor at Christmas, the practical, comfortable feeling of a store that was for everyone, not just the wealthy. You went there for the school clothes, the new sofa, the birthday gift, the ordinary business of outfitting a family. It gave Southern California a department store that felt like it belonged to regular people, a fixture of every mall and every childhood. The escalators carried you up through floor after floor, the appliance department humming with the same washing machine your neighbor owned. Everything sized for the real life of a working family. But the wave that swept away the regional department stores took the Broadway too. It was absorbed into Macy's and its sister chains in 1996, and one of Southern California's most familiar names vanished from the malls it had anchored for a century. Can you still see the grand old department store of Chicago? The one in a building so beautiful that people came just to admire the ironwork over its doors. Number 12. Carson Pirie Scott. The ironwork over the doors was so beautiful that people stopped on the sidewalk just to look at it. Dark swirls of cast metal, framing the windows of a State Street giant. Carson Pirie Scott, number 12, stood in downtown Chicago in a building designed by Louis Sullivan, and the ornamental metal around its entrance has been studied by architects from all over the world. You knew it as one of the anchors of Chicago shopping, a full department store where families bought their winter coats and their wedding china and their children's first good shoes. It sat a few blocks from the other great Chicago store, and together the two of them made State Street the place you went downtown when you wanted to shop in earnest. Carson's gave the city a store that was both grand and practical, a famous name inside a beautiful home, where the building itself was part of the pleasure of walking in. The tide that pulled down the other regional names pulled at Carson's just as hard. The company changed hands, the stores shrank, and they closed one by one until the last of them shut in 2018, leaving Sullivan's ironwork to frame windows that no longer belonged to the store that made it famous. The metal still curls above the sidewalk, admired by people who never got to shop there. What about the department store so tied to its city that people in New Jersey needed only one name for it? The pride of downtown Newark. Number 11. Bamberger's. In Newark, there was one store so much a part of the city that people spoke of it the way they spoke of a neighbor, and its name was Bamberger's. Number 11. Bamberger's opened in 1893 and grew into the great department store of northern New Jersey, a downtown Newark landmark that drew shoppers from every town around it. You went there for everything a household needed, the clothes and the furniture and the appliances, and at Christmas, the store filled with lights and toys, and the particular hum of a big city store dressed for the season. Its founder, Louis Bamberger, was known across Newark for giving back to the city, and the store carried a civic pride that went past selling. Bamberger's gave Newark something to be proud of, a place that felt like it belonged to the city and its people, woven into the ordinary rhythm of payday and holidays, and the first week of school. The store had been part of the Macy's company since 1929, and for decades that partnership kept it strong. In 1986, the parent company decided the Bamberger's name had run its course. The signs came down, the stores became Macy's, and one of New Jersey's most beloved names was quietly folded into a larger one. Whatever happened to the great Chicago store where you met your family under the corner clock and ate Christmas dinner beside a tree that reached the ceiling? Number 10. Marshall Field's. Meet me under the clock, people said, and everyone in Chicago knew exactly which clock they meant. The great bronze timepiece hanging over the corner of State and Washington. Marshall Field's, number 10, was the grandest department store the city ever had, and its flagship on State Street was a landmark for more than 100 years. You knew the Walnut Room, the restaurant on the 7th floor where the enormous Christmas tree stood every year while families waited in line for a table beneath it. You knew the Frango mints in their green boxes, the Christmas windows that pulled crowds onto the sidewalk, and the store's old promise to give the lady what she wants. Fields gave Chicago a place that was equal parts store and civic treasure, where the building, the food, the service, and the holiday magic all told you that you had arrived somewhere that mattered. The prices were high, and the malls kept pulling shoppers away. The same slow squeeze every grand store felt. When the Macy's company bought the chain and changed the name in 2006, the city took it hard. People protested outside the store, wore buttons, and wrote letters, mourning the loss of a name that had meant Chicago itself. And what of the New York store at the center of the most famous rivalry in retail? The one people named whenever they refused to give away a secret. Number 9. Gimbels. Does Macy's tell Gimbels? People said it for decades whenever they meant to keep something to themselves, and the phrase came straight out of the fiercest rivalry in American retail. Gimbels, number 9, was the great competitor, a department store chain whose famous flagship stood in New York, a short walk from the arch-rival it needled. You knew Gimbels from the crowds, the bargain basement, the balloons, and the sheer size of a store that was for a time one of the biggest in the country. It sat near Macy's in Herald Square, and the two of them turned ordinary shopping into a contest the whole city enjoyed watching. Gimbels gave New York a rival worth having, a store that kept prices honest and shopping lively, the scrappy underdog that made the giant work harder every day. By the 1980s, the company had lost its footing, sold off and squeezed until there was nothing left to save. In 1987, the Gimbels stores closed for good, and the name that had been half of America's most famous retail rivalry switched off like a light. The question outlived the store by decades. The bargain basement was famous in its own right, a scrum of shoppers digging for a deal, and the store's balloons floated over the Thanksgiving parade. It helped turn into a tradition. How about the Philadelphia store with a bronze eagle standing in the middle of the floor and a pipe organ so large it filled the whole building with sound? Number 8. Wanamaker's. Meet me at the Eagle, people in Philadelphia said for generations, and they meant the great bronze bird that sat in the middle of the marble court at Wanamaker's. Number 8. Wanamaker's was one of the first true department stores in America, and its downtown flagship was built like a palace, with a soaring courtyard called the Grand Court at its heart. You knew the Wanamaker organ, the largest playable pipe organ in the world, whose music poured down through the court twice a day. You knew the Christmas light show that turned the courtyard into a wonderland every December, and the Eagle that served as the meeting place for the entire city. John Wanamaker had built the store on honest prices and the money-back guarantee, ideas that changed the way America shopped. Wanamaker's gave Philadelphia a store that felt like a cathedral of commerce, where the organ and the eagle and the lights made an ordinary errand feel like an occasion. The building still stands and the organ still plays, but the Wanamaker name is gone, passed through other owners until it became a Macy's. The Eagle remains and people still meet there, yet the store that gave the Eagle its meaning belongs to memory now. What of the Detroit Giant so tall it flew the largest flag in the country and gave the whole city its Thanksgiving parade? Number 7. J.L. Hudson's. On the side of the building hung an American flag so enormous it could cover the front of the store, and everyone in Detroit knew it belonged to Hudson's. Number 7. J.L. Hudson's ran one of the largest department stores in the world from its downtown Detroit flagship, a tower of retail that rose more than 20 stories into the sky. You knew Hudson's for the Thanksgiving Day parade it gave the city, the one with the giant balloons that still rolls down the street today under a different name. You knew the flag, the toy floor, the bargain basement, and the sense that this was the center of Detroit, the place the whole region came downtown to shop. Hudson's gave the city a store that matched its confidence, big and generous and proud, the anchor of downtown and the giver of the parade that opened every Christmas season. Then downtown Detroit emptied out. The shoppers followed the highways to the suburbs, and the great store could not hold on. The name was folded into Marshall Field's and then Macy's. And in 1998, the towering downtown flagship was brought down in one of the largest building demolitions ever attempted. A hard morning for anyone who remembered it full of people. Remember the catalog company that mailed the whole country its dreams and quietly invented one of the most beloved characters of Christmas. Number 6. Montgomery Ward. Before there were stores on every corner, there was a thick catalog that arrived in the mail and set the whole world of goods on your kitchen table. And it came from Montgomery Ward. Number 6. Montgomery Ward started in 1872 as the first great mail order company, selling to farm families who lived too far from any real store. You knew it as Ward's, the place where you could order almost anything, a tool or a dress or a wood stove, and wait for it to come by rail and wagon to your door. In 1939, a copywriter at Ward's named Robert L. May wrote a little Christmas booklet for the store to give away, and the character he invented was Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, who soon belonged to the whole world. Ward's gave rural America a lifeline, a way to buy the same goods as the city at a fair, printed price, and it handed Christmas one of its most beloved friends almost by accident. The company that helped invent modern shopping could never quite keep pace with the rivals it had taught. It shrank through the 1980s and 1990s, and after more than a century, every Montgomery Ward store closed in 2001. The catalog that had once reached every farmhouse in the country went silent for good. Can you still see the grocery chain that was once the largest retailer on earth? The one that ground fresh coffee behind a familiar red storefront in every neighborhood. Number 5. A&P. There was a time when the biggest store company in the entire world was a grocery chain, and its red storefronts and the smell of fresh ground coffee were part of every American neighborhood. A&P, number 5, was the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, and for the first half of the 20th century, it stood as the largest retailer on earth. You knew it for 8 o'clock coffee ground fresh at the counter, for the Ann Page groceries and the Jane Parker baked goods, and for the simple fact that there seemed to be an A&P on nearly every busy corner. It helped invent the modern supermarket, the idea that you could push a cart down an aisle and gather a whole week of food with your own hands. A&P gave America affordable groceries at a scale no one had ever managed, feeding the country through the Depression and the war and the boom that followed, a name as familiar as the kitchen table itself. But the chain grew slow and old while newer supermarkets grew fast and cheap. It sold off pieces, closed stores, and shrank for decades, until the once mighty company finally went bankrupt and disappeared for good in 2015. The largest retailer the world had ever seen quietly ran out of road. What about the orange roof beside the highway? The one that promised 28 flavors of ice cream and a basket of fried clams to every family on a road trip. Number 4. Howard Johnson's. You spotted the orange roof from a mile down the highway, and every child in the back seat knew it meant ice cream, 28 flavors of it, waiting at the next exit. Howard Johnson's, number 4, was the great roadside restaurant of the American highway, its bright orange roof and turquoise trim marking the stops that turned a long drive into an adventure. You knew it for the 28 flavors, the fried clams, the grilled frankfurters, and the motor lodges out back where a tired family could sleep before the next day of driving. As the interstates spread across the country after the war, Howard Johnson spread with them, until the orange roof was one of the most familiar sights in America. Ho-Jo's gave the traveling family a place it could trust, the same roof and the same ice cream in every state, a friendly landmark that made the whole country feel a little smaller and a little safer. The interstates that built it also doomed it, as faster food chains crowded the exits and the orange roofs began to close one by one. For years, a single restaurant held on in Lake George, New York, the last of thousands, until it too closed in 2022, and the orange roof went dark for good. Whatever happened to the giant toy store where a cartoon giraffe met you at the door, and a jingle promised that you never had to grow up? Number 3. Toys R Us. A cartoon giraffe named Jeffrey met you at the door, And the moment you stepped inside, you were surrounded by more toys than you had ever seen in one place. Toys R Us. Number 3 was the giant toy store of the American childhood, a warehouse the size of a barn stacked to the ceiling with every toy a kid could dream of. You knew the jingle by heart, the one that promised you never had to grow up because you were a Toys R Us kid, and you knew the feeling of walking those aisles with a birthday coming or Christmas near. For a couple of generations of children, this was the destination, the place where the whole point was the wanting and the choosing. Toys R Us gave childhood a temple, a store so big and so full that a trip there was an event. The giraffe and the endless aisles, turning an ordinary afternoon into something a kid remembered for years. Then the internet learned to sell toys cheaper. The company drowned in debt it could not pay, and the giant that had once crushed every small toy store around it could not save itself. In 2018, the American stores held their going out of business sales and closed, and Jeffrey waved goodbye to the last generation of children who grew up in his aisles. And what of the store that sold everything under the sun? The one whose fat catalog held so many wishes that families named it for exactly that. Number 2, Sears. The catalog was so thick and so full of wishes that families gave it a name of its own, the Wish Book, and children lay on the floor circling everything they hoped to find under the tree. Sears, number 2, was the store that had everything, the company whose catalog reached every corner of America starting in 1888, and whose stores anchored the malls for a century after. You knew the brands the way you knew Family, Craftsman Tools, and Kenmore Appliances, the Die Hard battery and the Allstate coverage, all of it under one trusted roof. There was a time when you could order almost anything from Sears: tools, clothes, a washing machine, even a whole house delivered by railcar in numbered pieces for you to build yourself. Sears gave America the idea that a single company could supply a whole life, from the crib to the workshop to the roof over your head. A store so complete and so dependable that it felt permanent. But the retailer that had taught the country to shop could not learn the new ways fast enough. The catalog ended, the malls emptied, the debts piled up, and the company that once seemed eternal slid into bankruptcy in 2018 and all but vanished, a few lonely stores flickering where a giant used to stand. How about the original Five and Dime, the very first everything store, the one whose lunch counter fed a nation and once seeded the start of something far larger than a meal? Number 1, Woolworths. The little wooden counter with the round stools, the grilled cheese and the cherry Coke, the bins of penny candy and the smell of the lunch grill. All of it lived under one roof at Woolworths, and for most of a century that roof was everywhere. Number 1, F.W. Woolworths was the original Five and Dime, the store that invented the whole idea this list has been mourning, the everything store where ordinary people could afford a little of everything. Frank Woolworth opened his first lasting store in 1879 on a simple notion that goods priced at 5 and 10 cents, set out on open counters where you could pick them up and hold them, would sell themselves. He was right, and the red-fronted stores spread across America and around the world, into every small town and every big city downtown. You knew the creaky wooden floors, the parakeets and goldfish in the pet department, the sewing notions and the hairpins and the toys, and above all the lunch counter, where a kid could spin on a stool and a whole family could eat cheap and well. That lunch counter also holds one of the most important moments in the nation's history. On February 1, 1960, 4 young black college students sat down at the Woolworth's lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, where they knew they would not be served, and they refused to leave. Their quiet courage set off sit-ins across the South and helped move the country toward justice. The store was ordinary, and what happened at that counter was anything but. Woolworths gave America the Five and Dime, the democratic little store where a nickel bought something real, and everyone was welcome to walk in and browse, the ancestor of every discount store and dollar store that came after it. It was woven into the daily life of the country for more than 100 years. But the discounters it had inspired grew larger and cheaper. The downtowns it had anchored emptied out, and the old Five and Dime could not compete with the very idea it had set loose. In 1997, The company closed the last of its American Woolworth stores. The name did not quite die. It turned to a sideline it already owned, Athletic Shoes, and became the company we now know as Foot Locker. But the five and dime itself was gone. And that is the whole story of this list, isn't it? The five and dime that started it all. The department stores that dressed our cities for Christmas. The toy stores and record shops and roadside orange roofs. Every one of them gone now, living only in the memory of the people who walked their aisles. If you are one of those people, I would love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments which of these stores you miss the most, and share the one memory that came back to you while you listened. Maybe it was the smell of the lunch counter, or meeting your family under a certain clock, or the giraffe waiting at the toy store door. If this journey brought those memories back, please like this video and subscribe so we can keep them alive.